Chapter 16:13. Everyone in the hall was shocked. Hui Tong said that he would cripple Xiao Yi. He wouldn't kill anyone for Qin Hao. He would fight side by side with the other forces. He would only cripple Emperor Zhao's path. Even Yin Zhu and the Emperor were shocked. This monk is so unyielding and bold. Yin Zhu knew that Liao had no enmity with Tiangang Temple, and there was no personal grudge between Hui Tong and Xiao Yi. He did this because demons and Buddhists couldn't coexist. Hui Tong looked at the others. Everyone was shocked, but he wasn't surprised. In fact, he had thought of this a long time ago. However, Tiangang Temple was weak. It wouldn't be easy to take down Xiao Yi alone. Now, God gave Hui Tong a chance. He could take down Xiao Yi with the help of Qin Hao's trouble. Even if Yin Zhu, Warlord, and Emperor Yin were there, they would be restrained by many strong cultivators. He was confident that he could cripple Xiao Yi personally. Of course, he would only cripple Xiao Yi's cultivation. He wouldn't kill him. Buddhists were merciful. Abbot Hui Tong is upright and upright. You are the nemesis of evil. This old man admires you deeply. Here's a toast to you. Yin Zhu got up and walked down the stage. He poured a cup of wine for Hui Tong. He was starting to admire the monks of Tiangang Temple. Ba. Hui Tong took the cup and poured the wine on the ground. Buddhists didn't drink. He drank to heaven and earth. Yin Zhu nodded in satisfaction. He understood the sincerity of the other party. He turned and sat back in a main seat. With the abbot cleaning up the world, we will have a smooth journey in Daliao this time, Yin Zhu said happily. Then, his gaze landed on Emperor Qi. Brother, has the army of Northern Qi been arranged properly? Today, Emperor Qi came here. On the surface, he had brought Qi Yuan and 3 Runhuang generals. But secretly, the army must be ready. The sect had its sect's way of dealing with things. Between the empires, they naturally had their own way of dealing with things. In this battle, even if Liao wasn't destroyed, it would only exist in name. Uncle Yin, Northern Qi has not prepared anything because we are not participating in this battle. Unexpectedly, Prince Qi Yuan answered on behalf of Emperor Qi. What did you say? The Yin Emperor was stunned. He thought he had misheard. Northern Qi was not participating? This was completely different from what he had imagined. The other party's stance should be incomparably firm. Northern Liao and Northern Qi mind their own business. That was the case in the past. It is the case now, and it will be the case in the future. How you do things, Northern Qi cannot interfere. However, we will definitely not participate in the attack on Daliao. Qi Yuan answered very clearly and straightforwardly. Qi Ziqing, is your son's words your attitude? On the main seat, Yin Zhu roared. Qi Ziqing was the name of the Qi Emperor. Now that everything was ready, Northern Qi had dropped the ball at the crucial moment. Were they trying to undermine him? Emperor Qi raised his hand to touch his forehead, as if he was trying to avoid something. He deliberately did not answer. Elder Yin, there's no need to ask my father again. What I said just now is Northern Qi's attitude. Furthermore, I personally believe that since Zijuan has left, there is no need to launch a crusade against the Shao family with great fanfare. Isn't Master Hui Tong helping the world? Everyone, listen to me and let go. Qi Yuan spoke calmly, as if this matter had nothing to do with him. However, Morong Zijuan's death had nothing to do with him. How dare you? The Yin Emperor was furious. He slammed his palm on the table, causing it to crack. He glared at Qi Yuan as if he could spit fire. Northern Qi wanted to withdraw from the crusade against the Shao family. Not only that, but Xiong and Master Hui Tong wanted everyone to let go. His son Morong Zijuan had been killed by Qin Hao. Did the crown prince of Northern Yin die in vain? This Qi Yuan was speaking nonsense. It was too much. In the face of the Yin Emperor's fury, everyone was silent. Under such circumstances, any slip of the tongue could lead to an unexpected disaster. After all, Yin Zhu was sitting on top. Qi Yuan looked at the Yin Emperor and appeared very calm. This was because he knew many things that others did not know. He also knew that the alliance of the northern borderline forces in the temple was actually very weak in front of Qin Hao. After all, the news of Morong Zijuan's death was deliberately brought back by Qin Hao. That day, When the evil soul erupted, everyone barely escaped from the divine palace. They borrowed the nine-headed snakelet serpent to cross the inland sea. Among the disciples of the 7 peaks of the divine palace, 3 of them left the group. 1 returned to the northern borderline, while the other 2 returned to the great Zhou Empire. Zhou Wudao and his attendant by Xiaotong returned to the east continent. Qi Yuan returned to the northern borderline alone to help Qin Hao release the news of Murong Zijuan in advance. According to Qin Hao's analysis, there were 2 outcomes. One was that the northern borderline was already in chaos. In that case, there was no need to consider anything. After they returned, they would do whatever they needed to do. Whoever hurt Xiao, he would not be able to escape. The other was that the northern borderline remained calm, and a storm was brewing in the dark. This was because Qin Hao was not sure whether anyone from the northern borderline sect had escaped from Dilua Bay. But now, everything was very clear. Qin Hao guessed the second outcome correctly. Although the situation in the northern borderline was tense, it had not completely erupted into a war. Then, as long as Qi Yuan released the news, the Murong family would naturally make a move. They would gather their strength and make it convenient for Qin Hao to catch them all in one fell swoop. This was why the northern Qi prince was so calm at this moment. At the same time, he kindly reminded the people from the various sects in the temple to let go. He took advantage of the fact that Qin Hao was not angry because he would not vent his anger too much. Moreover, if the northern yin was honest enough and was willing to let go of this matter, perhaps Qin Hao would not heartlessly wipe out the Murong family. After all, Murong Zijuan had first tried to kill Qin Hao. It was his fault alone and had nothing to do with the family. But if the Murong family insisted on revenge, then this enmity would be great. Perhaps I shouldn't have said too much. Qi Yuan sneered inwardly. Based on the Yin Emperor's attitude, it was impossible for him to let go of his hatred. Perhaps the Xinyuan family in the southern mountain range was already finished. For some reason, Qi Yuan had an inexplicable feeling that Qin Hao had already come to the northern borderline and was in Yingguei City. It sounded a little unreal, but he did have such a feeling. Laugh? Are you mocking the Murong family of the Yin Kingdom? The Yin Emperor stood up from his chair. He felt that Qi Yuan's sneer was mocking the Murong family. What do you want? Seeing this, the Qi Emperor moved his throne and blocked in front of Qi Yuan. He looked straight at the Yin Emperor. Although this was the capital of the Yin Kingdom, and even if the Yin ancestor was present, he would not let anyone hurt his son. Qi Ziqing, you need to give the old man an explanation. The Yin ancestor waved his hand at the Yin Emperor, telling him to sit back down. If it were not for the fact that the old man of the Qi family was still alive, Qi Yuan's words would have taught the people of northern Qi a lesson today. Ancestor Yin, is my son not clear enough? What more explanation do you want? In this battle, no matter how much you fight, the Qi family will not participate. If you want to get people to leave, that's fine. I will leave now. Qi Yuan. The Qi Emperor turned his head and shouted. The fire wheel under his throne flickered, and he was about to fly away. The Qi Emperor, please wait. Seeing this, the lord of the Liuxing Palace hurriedly stopped him. He smiled and said, For Qin Hao, don't hurt our friendship. However, Qi Yuan's words are indeed a little hurtful. By the way, what is in the divine palace? As the lord of the Liuxing Palace spoke, he kept looking at Qi Yuan. He felt a little strange. Murong Zijuan had been killed. Logically speaking, Qin Hao should have known the consequences, but he still killed him. Was there a factor behind it? For example, a backer? And this backer might be someone from within the divine palace. The lord of the Liuxing Palace was very careful. He did not dare to involve the entire sect. If Qin Hao really brought back a person from the divine palace, then who could control the northern borderline? The supreme martial house of the continent had produced a god-level almighty who was unfathomable. People had to be careful. Yes, Qi Yuan, you and Prince Zijuan are participating in the divine palace together. What kind of holy land is the divine palace? Palace Master Chao of the Jian Palace also asked. The abbot of the Tiangang Temple, Huitong, looked at Qi Yuan with a strong interest. Everyone in the palace looked at him at the same time. Even the Yin ancestor and the Fu Di were the same. It was as if they had completely forgotten Qi Yuan's rash words. There is no divine palace. Everyone who is participating in the divine palace has never seen it. Qi Yuan replied, "The divine palace? It really did not exist. If it did, it was only in the imagination of the world. In the hearts of the living disciples of the divine palace, it was unforgettable. Qi Ziqing, look at your son. How can he speak to so many elders with such an attitude?" The Yin Emperor pointed at Qi Yuan's nose. The more he looked at him, the more he disliked him. Forget it. If you don't want to participate, then don't. Without Northern Qi, the northern borderline is still the northern borderline. With Palace Master Chao, Abbot Hui Tong, the Medicine Emperor Pavilion, and the people of the Liuxing Palace, why should we be afraid of a mere Shao family? Yin Ancestor said, glancing at the Fu Di. He felt that the Fu Di really wanted to kill Qin Hao. Of course, there was also the poor Medicine Emperor Pavilion. In that case, when do you plan to leave? The Liuxing Palace Master asked. The situation was set. Almost all the forces in the northern borderline were involved. As for Northern Qi, since Yin Ancestor did not say anything, he naturally could not say anything. In 3 days, you will follow the old man to Liaodu. Shao Yi will hand over his daughter and marry her. At this time, forget it. I will not make things difficult for the Shao family. Yin Ancestor said, 3 days? I think it's better to do it today. What if Qin Hao runs away with his tail between his legs? Jiang Xian was very anxious. He knew Shao Yi's temper. He really dared to gamble the fate of the empire to protect the safety of his daughter and son-in-law. But in this way, Jiang Xian would not be able to take revenge on Qin Hao. Run! Yin Ancestor snorted. Shao Yi is in my hands. Qin Hao will have to come back, even if he runs to the end of the world, unless he is willing to bear the name of a coward. He can run away, but the temple can't. Oh, sorry, Abbot. It's okay. Abbot Hui Tong's mouth trembled. He naturally knew that Yin Ancestor did not do it on purpose. Buzz! Suddenly, 2 sound waves appeared in the outside world. They seemed to fall from the void. They were intense and extremely heavy. Even though they were very far away, the sound waves had already soaked the entire palace hall and shook everyone's eardrums. The sound was full of power. Who is it? Yin Ancestor suddenly raised his head. He only felt the roars of 2 bulls and rhinoceroses coming from above. They pierced through the void and were extremely lethal. It was also at this moment that 2 terrifying emperors' light fell heavily from the sky and blasted on the palace hall. The entire hall was destroyed by the raging emperor's qi. Debris flew everywhere. Smoke and dust rose into the sky. The terrifying explosion spread throughout the entire Yingui city. In fact, before Yin Ancestor shouted, the several human sovereigns of the Murong family who were guarding the hall outside saw 2 emperors' shadows descending from the sky. Both of them were extremely tall and fierce. Amidst the emperor's light, they saw that one of them had the body of a huge green bull, and the other was a sturdy iron rhinoceros with rough skin and thick flesh. The human sovereigns of the Murong family immediately flew into the sky, preparing to intercept them. But at the same time, a flute sound spread out and entered the ears of the human sovereigns of the Murong family. It invaded their divine souls as if it could control the souls of cultivators. They felt that they were being held by a pair of invisible hands, and their bodies were unable to move. Emperor Yuan made his move. His speed was extremely fast. Those 2 figures were naturally Tsaiwa and Gu Kuei. Xintian Peaks, people built artifacts every day. In the past 3 years, their strength had transformed to an extremely terrifying level. With a single strike, they destroyed the hall. Chapter 16:14. The Emperor's light surged and fell from the sky like 2 pillars of platinum light bombarding the main hall of the palace. Countless buildings collapsed frequently, and the mountains in the city shook. The terrifying sound waves spread throughout Yingui City, resounding in every corner. In the endless imperial capital, the people looked at the storm of smoke and dust, their hearts trembling. Who exactly came and attacked the palace of the Yin Emperor? At this time, after hearing the commotion, the disciples of the various aristocratic families who were drinking and having fun in Yanhua restaurant also ran out one after another, looking at this scene with extremely shocked expressions. They simply couldn't imagine that someone would attack the palace. Today, the Yin Emperor held a banquet here, and almost all the top forces of the northern borderline were present. They were all in the palace, but someone actually dared to be so rebellious? Look, a person pointed to the void. Huanhua restaurant wasn't far from the imperial city, and the restaurant itself was maintained by a direct member of the Moron clan. At this moment, everyone saw that in the sky above the imperial palace, 3 figures were suspended in the air, surrounded by platinum essence energy. They were all Emperor Yuan. Which main region are they from? Did they come from the East Continent? Another person was shocked. In their impression, only Emperor Yuan of the East Continent had the guts to directly attack the Northern Yin Palace. If it was Xiao Yi, he would definitely not dare to do so either. Not the East Continent, but Western Liang. While everyone was puzzled, a tall young man stepped out of Yanhua restaurant. He was much taller than ordinary people. He wore a bamboo hat, and his silver hair hung down his back. Even though his face couldn't be seen, his temperament was still extremely outstanding. It was the strange man who was drinking in the corner of the restaurant. From Western Liang, everyone was shocked. How could it be? Western Liang, Qin Hao. Qin Hao raised his hand and took off his bamboo hat. A magical smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Before everyone could react, his body rose into the air and flew directly to the palace, joining the 3 figures of Emperor Yuan floating there. That's right, he was here. There was no need for the Northern Yin to look for him. Many people probably didn't expect that he would come in person today. Buzz! In the blink of an eye, Qin Hao arrived at everyone's side. His speed was extremely fast. He stood in the air, looking at the ruins below with his hands behind his back. At the same time, figures wrapped in platinum light flew up from the collapsed ruins and hovered in front of Qin Hao and the others. Although Xiaogua and Gu Kuei had succeeded in their previous attack, there were no ordinary people in the palace. They were all thearchs of the northern borderline, so it was impossible for them to be killed so easily. Moreover, there was Yin Zhu and Fu Di, 2 experts who were close to the Emperor Lord level. It's you. Among the many factions gathered in the northern frontier, Pavilion Master Jiang immediately recognized Qin Hao when he saw him. He was extremely shocked. He never thought that Qin Hao would take the initiative to come to them and even attack them. Qin Hao, the Yin Emperor's face tightened, his eyes filled with hatred as he gritted his teeth. What? Is he Qin Hao? Hall Master Lu Xing swept the dust off his body, wondering who would sneak attack him. Now, he knew that it was Qin Hao, whom he couldn't wait to kill. At this moment, Hall Master Lu Xing was overjoyed. He didn't have to go to Northern Liao anymore. At the instant they saw Qin Hao, everyone's emotions were different. Pavilion Master Jiang was shocked. The Yin Emperor was filled with hatred, and Hall Master Lu Xing was overjoyed. However, the Fu Di and Yin Zhu were unusually calm. While everyone was sizing up Qin Hao, he was also sizing up the other party's lineup. There were many factions in the northern borderline, and there were also monks. They had probably received benefits from the Moron clan. That's all for today. I don't want to hurt the innocent to resolve my personal grudge. Those who have nothing to do with it, please leave. Qin Hao said, those who have nothing to do with it? You killed the Northern Yin Crown Prince and provoked the northern borderline's martial arts orthodoxies. Do you think there's no one in the northern borderline? All the sects here are related to you. Originally, we were preparing to go to Daliao, but you came to us personally. This saves us a lot of trouble. Arrogant brat, why don't you give up? Hall Master Lu Xing roared and channeled his Emperor Qi. The starlight around him flourished, and the starlight around him shone brilliantly as it circled around his Emperor body. He stepped out and stretched out his hand, grabbing towards Qin Hao's body. Since the culprit was here, he would take him down and let Yin Zhu deal with him. Wong. An emperor's palm struck out, covering the sky and blotting out the sun. It was like a hand of the stars, grabbing towards Qin Hao's body. However, just as Hall Master Lu Xing was about to make his move, a blade light suddenly flew from the 9 heavens. The glaring blade cut through everything and slashed towards Hall Master Lu Xing's face. It was extremely domineering. Hall Master Lu Xing's heart trembled. This blade chi was extremely powerful, like a huge wave that could destroy everything. He raised his hand that was grabbing towards Qin Hao, grabbing towards the top of his head. With a ripping sound, the sound of cloth being torn apart could be heard. The domineering blade light slashed down, and the endless starry sky was cut apart. That hand of the stars was cut in half. Hall Master Lu Xing's expression suddenly changed. His opponent's cultivation wasn't inferior to his. With a roar, he struck out with both palms. A layer of starry light curtain rose above his head, colliding with the blade light. Only then did he manage to block the other party. However, this strike still caused Hall Master Lu Xing to fall down by dozens of meters. It was obvious that Dilly wasn't as strong as the other party. With your ability, are you worthy of controlling the great Tao, starry sky? Unknowingly, a muscular figure with a bare upper body stood in front of Qin Hao. This person had a valiant figure, and he carried a huge blade the size of a door on his back. His strong muscles were filled with power, and he looked extremely domineering. It was Zhang Yi. There's another one. Hall Master Lu Xing raised his head and saw Zhang Yi's body flickering with emperor light. His blade intent was boundlessly powerful. He was actually a saber arch. Not only him, but Xiaogua, Gu Kuwei, and Su Jin also released their cultivation at the same time. For balls of platinum light flickered, blinding everyone's eyes. All of them were emperors. Suddenly, the expressions of Palace Master Chao, Abbot Hui Tong, and Pavilion Master Jiang changed slightly. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant. With 4 emperors protecting you, is this what gives you the right to come to Northern Yin and behave atrociously? Emperor Yin was also taken aback, but he quickly calmed down. Naive, Hall Master Lu Xing's emperor light surged, and he once again floated at the same height as everyone else. He looked at the 4 people protecting Qin Hao. Are these 4 people the trump cards in Qin Hao's hands? Xiaogua, Gu Kuwei, and Su Jin were all first stage Emperor Yuan. The valiant saber of the arch was stronger, second stage Emperor Yuan. If Xiao Yi, Duan Zhanfei, and Emperor Yin were included, they were indeed a force that couldn't be ignored. But unfortunately, Qin Hao was too arrogant. He dared to come here and behave atrociously with just 4 low-level emperors. He was too arrogant. This time, he wouldn't be able to return. Zhang Yi and the other 3 weren't enough in front of the forces of Northern Border. Let me remind you again, those who are not involved, please leave. Qin Hao was calm. Naive? Who was more naive? Don't talk nonsense with him. Attack. Hall Master Lu Xing said coldly. Emperor light surged, turning into a ball of intense starlight that attacked again. Leave? Why leave? Did the forces of Northern Border think that he was afraid of bringing 4 low-level emperors over? Hall Master Lu Xing directly rushed towards Su Jin. He knew that Zhang Yi wasn't easy to deal with. Xiaogua and Gu Kuei were also strong and sturdy. In comparison, the guy with the flute had a weaker aura. It was better to deal with him. Palace Master Chao, his Vice Palace Master, and Abbot Hui Tong looked at each other. Immediately, 3 balls of Emperor light quickly erupted, causing the void to tremble. At this point, it was impossible for them to retreat. Dharma reflection. Abbot Hui Tong spat out a voice. Among the monks of Tiangang Temple, a martial arts senior monk stepped forward. The light of Buddha shone brightly as he went straight for Qin Hao. He ran faster and faster, and every step he took caused the air to rumble. The chanting of the Dharma filled the air, and there seemed to be many Buddha shadows running with him. Abbot Hui Tong didn't make a move because his target wasn't Qin Hao. He said that he only wanted to cripple Xiao Yi. Therefore, he let Dharma Reflection make a move on his behalf. Dharma Reflection was also a low-level emperor, and his cultivation was second only to Hui Tong. He was originally the abbot of Tiangang Temple's Commandment Hall, and his offensive power was extremely strong. In that case, I don't need to hold back anymore, Zhang Yi. Qin Hao muttered. Johnny took a step forward and clenched his fist. The giant blade on his shoulder was raised straight, and he slashed fiercely at Dharma Reflection. Monk Fa Zhao was a little strong, and Qin Hao could feel that Sayogwa and Gu Kuei might not be his match. Bang! 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 For a time, the 8 emperors fought together, and 4 muffled sounds of thunder came from the sky. The Hall Master of Meteor Hall was a second-level emperor, and he controlled the power of the starry sky. The rules transformed into a great Dao cage to suppress Su Jin. Although Su Jin was a first-level emperor, and the Yawang Peak wasn't good at great Dao attacks, he wasn't someone that the Hall Master of Meteor Hall could defeat. Sayogwa was a first-level emperor, and he faced the Palace Master of Jian Palace. The other party was a third-level emperor, the same as Emperor Qi and Emperor Yin. Gu Qi roared and punched towards the elder of Jian Palace. He punched out, and the roar of a huge iron rhinoceros came from the void. The incomparably terrifying fist force condensed into an iron rhinoceros battle beast that charged towards the Vice Palace Master of Jian Palace. In the imperial capital, countless people looked up. The 8 emperors fought, and they felt as if the sky was collapsing above their heads. Every collision of Emperor Yuan's radiance was an existence that they could only look at but not see. But even more people didn't expect that Qin Hao would dare to come to the imperial capital of Northern Yin and directly face Emperor Yin. After all, Emperor Yin came out of seclusion, and the Murong clan's patriarch was also here. How could Qin Hao have such guts? Terrifying vibrations reverberated as Emperor Yuan attacked. Every sound that came out was like a terrifying thunderclap. Not to mention the common people. Even the descendants of the major aristocratic families of Northern Yin felt suffocated when they saw this. Their cultivation bases were as insignificant as dust compared to those big shots who were fighting. Roar! Sayogwa closed in step by step. No matter how Palace Master Chao's sound techniques fell, his fighting spirit didn't waver. He released his great strength bull demon physique, and his body grew bigger and bigger, bullier and bullier. He was like a terrifying war beast, bearing the bombardment of Palace Master Chao as he advanced. However, every time Sayogwa's heavy punch landed on Palace Master Chao's radiance, the other party felt the blood in his body flowing backward, and his internal organs were overturned. He was a third-level Emperor Yuan, but he didn't gain the slightest advantage. Not only him, but the Vice Palace Master was also the same. Facing Gu Kuei's random attacks, the Vice Palace Master's cultivation base was 1 level lower than Palace Master Chao's. He was a second-level emperor. Not only did he not gain the upper hand, but he was also vaguely suppressed by Gu Kuei. Among the 4 battles, only the eminent monks of Tiangang Temple were firm and steady. Facing the power of Zhan Ye's domineering blade, Fa Zhao didn't retreat half a step. Instead, he became stronger and stronger. This monk is not ordinary. Qin Hao thought. He was a 4th-level Emperor Yuan, 2 levels higher than Zhan Yi, but he could become stronger as the battle went on. He wasn't inferior to Zhan Yi, who came from the Divine Palace's Kaiyang Hall. Among the emperors in the outside world, Fa Zhao was definitely a top powerhouse in the same realm. Qin Hao died. At this moment, an ear-piercing roar sounded. Emperor Yin moved. Chapter 16:15. Palace Master Chao and Vice Palace Master of Jian Palace, Hall Master Lu Xing, Fa Zhao of Tiangang Temple, and the 4 Yuan emperors of the northern border all tried to get close to Qin Hao, but they were all blocked by the people he brought. Not only that, but the 2 Palace Masters of Jian Palace were also gradually losing the upper hand, which was beyond everyone's expectations. If Emperor Yin didn't make a move, no one would be able to break through the other party's blockade. They couldn't let Ancestor Yin and the Palace Emperor come out, right? That would be beneath the 2 ancestral patriarchs. Emperor Yin roared like a lion, his imperial robe rustling. He took a step forward and directly appeared in front of Qin Hao. Countless people in the city looked up into the sky. Qin Hao's Dao protector, Yuan Emperor, was so powerful that he actually forced Emperor Yin to make a move personally. Hey, what's that? A cultivator pointed up into the void, and a dazzling light flew down. It was like a human-shaped sword chi, sharp and unstoppable. It fell directly on top of Emperor Yan's head. Everyone's heart beat violently. Was there someone else behind Qin Hao? The Sword Emperor. Emperor Yan naturally sensed that there was a sword coming from the sky. Even from far away, he could feel the unparalleled sharpness contained in the sword will. He stopped moving, and the Emperor light around him shone brightly. The power of his bloodline surged, and a huge golden lion phantom appeared behind him. It had 8 golden lion heads. As the sword will fell, Emperor Yin let out a lion's roar. He spat out a turbulent, whistling storm towards the human figure in the sword will. Whoosh! The platinum sword chi flew all the way. Shou Wuk formed a sword seal and ignored the power of the royal family of Northern Yan's bloodline. The sword chi went straight into the storm. With a loud explosion, the storm was penetrated by the sword chi. Then, it continued to fall towards Emperor Yan. What a sharp sword! Emperor Yan was slightly shocked. He quickly retreated in front of Qin Hao and teleported away. Swoosh! The sword chi fell out of the sky. The light dispersed and turned into a young man with an extraordinary temperament. The moment Shou Wuk arrived, a strand of hair slowly floated down from where Emperor Yan was originally standing and fell into the city. What a fast sword! The Qi Emperor witnessed the entire process from afar. From a moment Shou Wuk appeared to the moment the Yan Emperor was forced to dodge, the Qi Emperor had lost a strand of his emperor hair in just one exchange. One could imagine how dangerous it was. The young man who controlled the sword chi was very impressive. Who are you? At this moment, Emperor Yan was greatly alarmed. His crown had fallen off, and his hair was disheveled. He was just a hair away from having his head pierced by the sword chi. The sword had directly pierced through his protective emperor chi. This person's sword Dao was simply superb. He was definitely not a sword cultivator of the northern frontier. There was no such sharp sword in the northern frontier. Shou Wuk looked silently at the Yan Emperor. He did not answer. His eyes were calm. His sword-like fingers rose again and pointed forward. Whoosh! Behind him, sword chi flowed in all directions and spread out in a fan shape. Numerous sword chi that was so fast that it could not be seen in the blink of an eye flew forward to kill. There were countless of them, and they were airtight. My grandson, be careful, the Yin ancestor reminded. He was slightly moved. This sword cultivator's realm was not high. He was only at the 2nd level of the Yuan Emperor realm, but his sword Dao was very terrifying. It seemed to be able to pierce through all obstacles. Was this sword cultivator also one of Qin Hao's men? Absorb the soul into the body. The Yin Emperor roared. He could tell that the sword cultivator's realm was lower than his, but he gave him an extremely strong pressure. This person was extraordinary. Moreover, he was qualified to be reminded by the patriarch. This proved that this person was not ordinary. Therefore, the Yin Emperor did not hesitate and directly absorbed the soul into his body. He showed everyone his strongest battle form, even though he hated the beast form of the essence soul. Roar! A wild lion roared in the sky. The Yin Emperor's appearance changed drastically. He was half human and half lion. He had a lion's head and a human's body. He had thick limbs, and his imperial robe was torn apart. A long lion's tail was dragged out. He looked extremely ferocious and rough. He forced the Yin Emperor into such a state the moment he appeared. Who is this person? Emperor Qi asked Qi Yuan through voice transmission. The successor of the southern region's Sword the Arch, Shou Wuk of the Sword Sect, Qi Yuan replied. At this moment, he was also very surprised. How long had it been since they parted? Xiaogua, Gu Kuei, and Su Jin had all become thearchs. Moreover, Shou Wuk had broken through to the 2nd stage of the Arch Yuan realm. Zhang Yi had also improved greatly. But before they parted, Qi Yuan's cultivation was not comparable to Xiaogua's. He had not perfected his laws yet. What happened to Qin Hao and the others in the southern region in the past 2 months? Qi Yuan naturally did not know that the 300 or so fellow disciples who stayed with Qin Hao had all made astonishing progress. They had devoured the spirit qi of the Xinyuan family's protective array and forcefully advanced their realms. Their physical bodies and divine souls had been tempered to the extreme in the divine palace. As long as their laws were perfected, they would naturally break through to the Arch realm. Many people had already stepped into the Arch realm. If Qi Yuan was also there at that time, he would definitely have reached the first stage of the Arch realm. It was just that he missed a baptism. Of course, the one who had changed the most was still Qin Hao, who had reached the fourth stage of the Arch Yuan realm. Endless sword qi flew forward. The Yin Emperor absorbed his soul into his body. His senses and physique were all strengthened. When his Dili was activated, the roar of a divine lion came from the void. His Emperor's white gold aura had more than doubled. Emperor Yin raised his lion paw, and the will of the Emperor merged with the great path. Above the sky, a huge handprint appeared at the same time. As his lion paw fell, the huge handprint pressed down at the same time, slamming onto the flying sword qi. With a deafening boom, the sword qi all over the sky was shattered. That's more like it. Showuk's calm expression changed slightly. He was smiling. The Murong family was in charge of the Northern Yin Empire. They were an imperial family after all. It was really embarrassing for the Northern Borders Emperor to be defeated so easily. Young man, you will regret this. The Yin Emperor's lion head spat out an extremely cold voice. The identity of the young swordsman was unknown. Since he helped Qin Hao, he was an enemy of the Northern Yin Empire. The Yin Emperor would not be merciful and disregard any consequences. Showuk would be responsible for all the consequences. He opened his lion mouth as if to swallow the sky. A terrible roar slowly spread. Above the sky, countless golden lion shadows appeared. All of the golden lion shadows knelt down, facing the Yin Emperor as if they were worshipping the King of Lions. One after another, the will of the Berserk Lion continued to merge with the Yin Emperor's divine soul, causing his will of the Emperor to rise crazily. The Murong family's imperial technique, Will of the Lion King. Emperor Qi's expression was solemn. He was a little worried for Showuk. The Yin Emperor used his family's bloodline imperial technique and entered a state of madness. If it were Emperor Qi facing the frenzied Yin Emperor, he would not dare to say that he could win. And this young swordsman was only at the second stage of the Arch Yuan realm. His sword is far stronger than you think. Qi Yuan was very calm. Who was Showuk? He was known as one of the chief disciples of Daozong Peak. If even the Yin Emperor could not deal with him, then the title of chief disciple of the Divine Palace Peak was in vain. This sword, taming the lion. Showuk raised his sword finger above his head. The will of the Emperor resonated with heaven and earth. It was as if his will had merged into the firmament, using the will of heaven and earth as a sword. It was the ultimate technique of the sword sect, borrowing the sword from the heavens. Whoosh! A towering sword qi brewed. Controlled by Showuk's will, it fell from the 9 heavens. The sound of the sword of the great path rumbled. It carried the momentum of heaven and earth as it pierced toward the Lion King, Emperor Yin. The Yin Emperor raised his beast-like eyes and stared at the 9 heaven sword qi. At this moment, his divine soul actually trembled. Immediately, an even crazier will of the Lion King erupted and swept out. The Yin Emperor completely transformed into the body of a lion. His body was 100 feet long and glowed with a golden luster. His 8 heads roared toward the sky, and his power was terrifying to the extreme. The Yin Emperor's 100-foot lion body leaped into the sky and directly swallowed the sword qi from beyond the sky. In the city, countless warriors trembled in fear. Many cultivators from all over the northern borderline rushed over frantically. Looking at such a terrible scene, they were shocked. Whether it was Showuk's sword qi that gathered the momentum of heaven and earth, or the Yin Emperor who absorbed his soul into his body and unleashed his bloodline imperial law, they were all extremely powerful. Every move seemed to be able to destroy heaven and earth. Get down. On Showuk's body, the light of rules was dazzling. His spiritual soul seemed to have merged with the nine heavens sword chi. The sword was him, and he stabbed down at the golden lion. The 8 heads of the giant lion roared, and his momentum was wild to the extreme. The sword chi stabbed down, and the lion's mouth directly went in, trying to swallow Sho Wuck's spiritual soul and sword will. However, when the sword entered the mouth, the lion's head was directly penetrated by the sword light. It pierced through without any hindrance and slashed at the giant lion's 100-foot body. The gigantic lion let out a roar as its sharp claws slammed into the sword. Another head bit down on the sword, and after that, the 3rd head, the 4th head, the 5th head, all the way until the other 8 heads also bit down on the sword. The boundless will of the berserk lion was absorbed into the sword chi, wanting to tear head Wuck's body into pieces. There was a hiss. On Sho Wuck's white robe, a tear spread out and blood gradually seeped out, but he did not care. His sword-like eyebrows rose slightly, and an even more turbulent sword will rose into the sky and merged with the sword chi of the Great Path. In an instant, the huge sword chi erupted with terrifying sword light and currents. Currents raged and cut, and in an instant, 3 more lion heads were shattered. The giant lion that the Yin Emperor had transformed into was covered in blood. Roar! Finally, the sword light was completely shattered in the lion's mouth. Countless flowers of blood bloomed from Sho Wuck's body, but at the same time, the Yin Emperor seemed to have been pierced by the sword chi. He let out a scream, and the state of soul absorption was broken. He turned back into a human, and with a trail of blood, he fell from the sky into the ruins of the palace, causing the ground to tremble. Powerful, sticky sweat seeped out of the Chi Emperor's palms. This swordsman was indeed a disciple of the Southern Region Emperor. His sword was really powerful, and it had directly pierced through the Yin Emperor's vital spirit. This attack must have caused him quite a bit of damage. Wuck! Qin Hao saw that Sho Wuck was also injured. It's just a superficial wound. It doesn't matter. Sho Wuck turned back and smiled. If he released his vital spirit and used it to activate the Emperor's will and rules, the Yin Emperor would definitely not be able to withstand his sword. But this way, he would not be able to train his sword. He needed an equal and fair battle to train his way of the sword. Therefore, he did not use the sword Calamity Lotus. This was also Muri's instructions. My grandson. Yinzu looked down. The Yin Emperor had actually been defeated. He had absorbed his soul into his body and used his family's bloodline emperor's art, but he still could not defeat the swordsman. Moreover, the swordsman had not released his vital spirit. He had only used the emperor's will and rules to defeat the Murong clan's ruler's strongest battle form. Buzz! An invisible pressure spread out from the void, covering the heads of Yin Zhu and Fu Di. The pressure was so strong that it seemed to suck into their divine souls. Yin Zhu, who was about to attack, suddenly stopped. He looked up at the sky. There was actually someone else. Chapter 16:16. An emperor's will descended. It was vigorous and boundless, shrouding Yin Zhu and Fu Di, giving them a great sense of oppression. Yin Zhu suddenly stopped, as if he would be attacked by the emperor's will if he dared to take another step. Fu Di's face was solemn. He naturally felt the pressure from the sky. This emperor's will was extremely vast and domineering. Its cultivation was not below his or Yin Zhu's. It seemed that Qin Hao had come prepared today. Bang! Countless palace rubble flew out from the ruins. A figure made of emperor's light slowly floated back. Emperor Yan's robe was torn, revealing many sword wounds. His aura was much weaker than before, and his hair was disheveled. He no longer looked like an emperor. At this moment, he stared at Sho Wuck. This person's sword was really strong. Before his essence soul was out, he had defeated his strongest battle form. Although Sho Wuck also suffered many injuries, Emperor Yin knew that they were just superficial wounds. His sword will did not affect him at all. His sword will alone was able to eliminate his sword will. With this person around, Emperor Yin could not get close to Qin Hao. In the city, including the palace, countless people and members of the Murong clan had seen this battle. An unknown sword emperor had defeated Emperor Yin of the northern frontier. He was so young, but his sword Dao was superb. He could be called a monster. Emperor Yin had obviously been severely injured in this battle. Countless people were shocked. Where did Qin Hao find such a helper? So many emperors came to protect him. When did Xiao Yi's son-in-law become so powerful? What a rising star. In the past, I only knew that Qin Hao and Zhou Wu Dao were more talented than their generation. I didn't expect that there would be such a genius in the southern region. He defeated Emperor Yin in his best battle form at the second stage of Emperor Yuan. If he had been in the imperial martial competition a few years ago, it would not have been so easy for Qin Hao to win. The Qi Emperor praised. Qi Yuan nodded. He also admitted that if Shou Wuk participated in the imperial martial competition, Qin Hao would definitely lose. But if Qin Hao wanted to win, he would have to pay a heavy price. There were indeed many real talents in South Domain, such as Chang Helou, Yu Qianyang, Ning Tianxing, juniors of Li Clan and Arhut Palace. None of them could be matched by Xianyuan Wuji. Xianyuan Wuji defeated Duan Ziju with only one movement. Pavilion Master Jiang, why have you come my place? Speaking of which, you should be facing Qin Hao right now. The Qi Emperor suddenly discovered that unknowingly, there was another person beside him. This person was none other than Pavilion Master Jiang of the Medicine Emperor Pavilion. Previously, during the banquet in the hall, Pavilion Master Jiang's battle intent surged to the heavens. He claimed that he would first destroy Xiao Yi, then kill Qin Hao, and that the gods and Buddhas would not be able to stop him. Now, Qin Hao had come in person, but Pavilion Master Jiang did not stand in the Moron clan's camp. Instead, he sneaked behind the Qi Emperor. What was going on? Shu, don't make a fuss. Don't let Qin Hao discover me. I am enduring humiliation and observing the situation clearly. Then, I will suddenly make a move and give him a head-on blow. The situation is unclear now, so I have to endure. Pavilion Master Jiang quickly gestured for him to keep quiet. A stream of nervous sweat flowed down his forehead. Face Qin Hao directly? Who would be willing to face him? In the current situation, who wasn't at the level of Emperor Yuan? Although the Medicine Emperor Pavilion was a top force in Beijiang, it was actually backed by Holy Emperor Jiang to maintain the dignity of the sect. He, Pavilion Master Jiang, was at the Emperor realm. No matter how arrogant he was, it was impossible for him to fight with Emperor Yuan. Was he courting death? Moreover, he could clearly see that among the several emperors that Qin had brought with him, Xiaogua, the murderer who crippled his eldest son, Jiang Zizai, was clearly at the Yuan Venerate level 5 years ago. Now, his cultivation realm had skyrocketed and he had become Emperor Yuan. What did this mean? He, Pavilion Master Jiang, hadn't been blinded by hatred yet. Xiaogua had become an emperor, but Qin Hao hadn't made a move yet. If he suddenly ran to Qin Hao, what if he didn't dare to think further? Xiaogua was Qin Hao's little follower, a die-hard fan who followed every order. Even a fool could understand some of the hidden meanings. Emperor Qi stared at Pavilion Master Jiang strangely. Could it be that this guy's brain had gone muddled because of the fire from refining medicine? His attitude was so arrogant before, but now he was so cowardly. He was simply a disgrace to the Holy Emperor. However, if this battle continued and Yanzu didn't make a move, no one would be able to touch Qin Hao. At that moment, Qin Hao looked across. Wuk's Emperor Intent Foundation was solid. Although he was injured in the battle with Emperor Yin, he said that it wasn't a big deal. Naturally, it was impossible for him to be injured by the other party's laws. At present, there were only 3 people left among the various forces in Beijiang who were still qualified to participate in the battle. Of the 2 old men, one was wearing the dragon robe of the Northern Yin Emperor, so he definitely had a relationship with the Moron clan. The other old man looked exceptionally cold. He was dressed in black and had a strong, murderous intent. Qin Hao didn't know who this old man in black was. In addition, at the front of the many monks in Beijiang, there was a burly monk. Although he was wearing a large kasaya, it couldn't hide his strong and fierce aura. This monk is a little dangerous. Qin Hao thought to himself, for him to be able to smell a wisp of danger, The monk's strength was definitely not ordinary. Tiangang Temple's abbot Huitong also glanced at Qin Hao. Emperor Yin was severely injured by the young swordsman and obviously didn't have the extra strength to take down Qin Hao. The Yin clan and Emperor Yin seemed to feel a threat and didn't dare to act rashly. If this continued, once the two palace masters of Juyin Palace were defeated, the situation would be very disadvantageous for Beijiang. Amipa, Dong! A Buddha foot stepped forward, and the sky suddenly trembled. Abbot Huitong had to make a move, even if he didn't want to. Seeing this scene, Emperor Qi and the many people watching Zhan Wu below trembled. Divine Monk Huitong finally intervened. This Tiangang Temple's abbot was extremely strong. It was said that below the patriarchs of the various forces in Beijiang, there was no one who was a match for Emperor Yuan. Huitong's entry would definitely put a lot of pressure on Qin Hao. They just didn't know how he should deal with it. Benefactor Qin, the sea of bitterness is boundless. Turn back, and the shore is at hand. Put down the butcher's knife in your hand and stop killing. Huitong let out a voice, but it was like a Buddhist chant. Endless chanting sounds filled the sky, incomparably solemn. Shore? Where's the shore? Once a person is born, there is no turning back. If I put down my knife, how can I protect the people I protect? Today, Great Master is standing on my side and attacking me. Isn't that killing? Moreover, the knife in my hand might not be a butcher's knife. Qin Hao said, "Do Buddhists always kidnap others and tamper with the will of others in the name of mercy?" I'm helpless. Huitong shook his head. Qin Hao's demonic barrier was too deep. He was as hopeless as Shao Yi. As he spoke, he suddenly raised his Buddha palm. Suddenly, his body was illuminated by Buddhist light, as if Buddha had descended. Sacred golden light radiated, and the entire sky of Yingui City became a world of Buddhist light. So strong. Feeling the pressure of Buddha, countless martial artists in the city were shocked. Looking at Huitong under the Buddhist light, it was as if they were facing the true lord of the Buddhist world. This cultivation, Emperor Qi's face also changed. Within Emperor Yuan, he had never met a worthy opponent. This slogan attached to Huitong was definitely worthy of this name. Qin Hao, what should I do? Are there other powerhouses behind him? Swoosh! At the top of the sky, a mass of white gold emperor light lit up. Just as Emperor Qi thought there were. And there was more than one. Swoosh! The second one. The third one. The fourth one. For a time, the white gold emperor light flickered one after another, becoming brighter and brighter. It was as if the stars in the sky were lit up, carrying with it waves of Emperor Yuan's aura. The closer the distance, the more one could feel the strength of these emperor auras. So many. Qi Yuan raised his head. 6 white gold emperor lights fell, suppressing Huitong's head. Within the fastest water-type emperor light was Yi Shuihen's figure. Monk, step back. A loud roar descended from the sky. Yi Shuihen's dilly bloomed, forming a white gold water spear in his hand. He threw it down at Huitong's head with all his might. Behind him, the dog spirit's pair of meat wings flapped, and raging flames spewed out from his mouth like a river of lava flowing from the sky, wanting to devour everything. Huitong raised his head, frowning slightly. Obviously, he didn't expect that Qin Hao would have so many emperors behind him. However, Huitong's expression was calm as usual. He raised his Buddha palm and punched forward. Endless Buddhist aura surged, easily annihilating Yi Shuihen's water spear. At this moment, the dog spirit spat out lava fire, pouring it down onto Huitong's Buddha body. He was bathed in the lava river, and the Buddhist light around him was dazzling. He wasn't affected at all. Battle of the 9 Palaces dilly begin. With a roar filled with fighting spirit, Qin Yun stabbed down with his halberd. The Arch Xuanyuan's halberd followed the lava river and stabbed towards the Buddhist light. It only pierced 2 feet in before it couldn't go any further. It was suspended above Huitong's head. The arch artifact. Huitong's eyes suddenly widened, and a trace of shock appeared on his face. He looked up at the halberd suspended in front of him. The weapon had great Tao and the arch intent flowing around it. It was an extremely high-grade, the arch artifact. Unfortunately, your cultivation is too weak. Raising his hand, Huitong directly grabbed the Xianyuan halberd. Even though he had become a monk, he still cultivated martial arts and stepped into the ranks of Emperor Yuan. Who could resist the temptation of an arch artifact? The great Tao Dili emanating from this arch artifact was extremely powerful. It was very likely to be the legendary supreme weapon used by the arch powerhouses. Huitong was naturally tempted. Danger! A silly and rough roar sounded. Huitong was greedy for the halberd and wanted to snatch it for himself. At this moment, Ahei Huang, who had arrived later, each held a purple gold thunder hammer in their hands. When the two hammers collided, a terrifying roar burst out. The terrifying power of thunder wrapped around the hammers as they smashed towards Huitong. Solidify! Will of the way of ice filled the air. The power of ice and snow around Chun Wanqin floated, making her look like a goddess of ice. She pointed her finger forward, and will of the way of ice swept over Huitong's legs, freezing him where he stood. 6 Thearchs attacked together. Break! Huitong's legs erupted with a terrifying Buddhist light, easily dispersing the frost Tao intent. He didn't have time to snatch the halberd, so he opened his fists and attacked the 2 purple gold thunder hammers at the same time. He could feel that the thunder Tao intent on the hammers was very weak. It didn't seem to be condensed from the arch intent, but more like inscriptions. It wasn't worth mentioning. What was truly powerful was the power contained in the hammers. To be precise, it was the 2 demonic beasts that swung the hammers. They were extremely powerful and couldn't be ignored. Pung! Pung! 2 deafening sounds rang out as the fists and hammers collided. At this moment, the sky seemed to explode, and there was a violent sound of metal colliding. The eardrums of countless people in the city were torn, and their minds were shaken. The weaker cultivators directly spat out blood and fell to the ground. Even Emperor Qi and Emperor Yin hurriedly released their arch light to block, but they were still swept away by the aftershock. Their blood and Qi were in turmoil. With a cry, Ahei Huang spat out 2 arrows of blood at the same time. The violent Buddhist power spread through his arms, and the lightning and the thunder hammers were directly scattered. The hammers flew out of his hands, and he couldn't hold them at all. Even as an ancient demonic beast with the power of the god's blessing, he couldn't resist Huitong at this moment. The Centaur brothers were suppressed for the first time, and they were sent flying backward. However, Huitong didn't have it easy either. He was forced back a few steps. Qin Yin took the opportunity to retreat with the dog spirit to prevent Emperor Xuanyuan's halberd from being snatched away. This monk is quite powerful. Qin Hao was slightly surprised, and he was also sweating. Chapter 16-17. Mizar Hall's ultimate emperor technique, the 9 palaces battle Dili. Qin Yun had opened the 6 palaces acupoints and stabbed with the Xianyuan the arch-halberd. If it were Emperor Yin, he would probably need to use all his strength to block it. But this halberd was unable to completely pierce through Huitong's protective Buddhist light. Ahei Huang had the power of the god's blessing. The pure brute force of an ancient beast was extremely powerful. His punch was so powerful that his weapon was sent flying. He even spat out a mouthful of blood. Not only them, but the heavenly fire in the dog spirit's body was nurtured by the red lotus tyrannical fire. Yishuehan and Chun Wanqin were born with elemental Tao souls. Their elemental Tao souls of a single attribute were extremely pure and contained the power of the great Tao of nature. Even though they were all first-layer Emperor Yuan, none of the disciples of the Divine Palace would lose to a third-layer emperor from the outside world. Even a 6th-layer Emperor Yuan would not be able to block such a formation. However, Huitong alone defeated them and almost took away the Xianyuan the arch-halberd. This monk was powerful. Roar! The dog spirit's eyes glowed with scarlet light. Emperor fire surged around its body. It let out a long howl like a wolf's howl. The will of the beast emperor surged into the void. Everywhere it passed, huge dog shadows appeared one after another. There were so many of them that it was as if a pack of wolves had gathered. It had awakened the Medicine Valley's Beast Emperor's will of the Emperor. Roar! Another roar was heard. The void was filled with the shadows of wild hounds, and they rushed towards Hui Tong like a surging tide. The shadows of the hounds overlapped and intertwined with each other, like an army of wolves sweeping through everything. At this moment, Hui Tong was surrounded by Buddhist light. The place where he stood emitted an extremely solemn Buddhist golden light. His Buddhist will triggered the power of heaven and earth. A vast and boundless Buddhist palm condensed and pressed down. The Buddhist palm covered all the wolves and annihilated them in one strike. Ahei Huang revealed his centaur true form. He was over 60 zhang tall and exuded a terrifying aura of wild beasts. His hooves, shrouded in emperor light, stomped down heavily, like two gigantic mountains pressing down on Hui Tong's head. Hui Tong raised his head. His thick black eyebrows seemed to be wrapped in anger. The Buddhist light on his body rose into the air and condensed into two giant fists in the air. It went against the heavens and was accompanied by an extremely heavy rumbling sound as it smashed into the abdomens of the two centaurs. The two ancient beasts' hooves didn't even manage to step down before they were sent flying, and blood splattered everywhere. This punch had obviously caused Ahei Huang quite a bit of damage. Yi Shuohen's face tightened. After the great victory in the southern region and the annihilation of the Xinyuan clan, would they encounter such a powerful opponent as soon as they entered the Emperor realm? At this moment, endless water god light descended and attached to Yi Shuohen's body. It was as if he was wearing a layer of Mercury divine armor. His aura became even more sacred. The sound of raging waves could be heard from the void. It was as if the god of the sea had descended to the mortal world. He silently looked at Chen Wanqin. At this moment, Chen Wanqin's entire body became crystal clear. She was like an ice sculpture standing in the air. Countless dazzling ice crystals floated down around her. They sprinkled down one after another, noble and holy. But gradually, a terrifying snowstorm swept out and curled around her crystal-clear body. She seemed to have changed into a different appearance. She was like an inviolable blizzard goddess. Hui Tong's strength was extremely powerful. The six of them couldn't break through his protective Buddhist light. On the contrary, every time he attacked, he would injure them. Under such circumstances, Yi Shuohen and Chen Wanqin could only use their Monarch soul fusion technique. Go! The water god emperor will form a trident. Yi Shuohen waved it, and the endless power of the sea appeared behind him. It turned into a magnificent world of the sea. Surging waves gathered towards Chen Wanqin and merged into the snowstorm above her body. At this moment, in the sky above the palace, a terrifying sound of ice forming could be heard. The entire void seemed to be frozen. The will of the Ice Empress bloomed, and the snowstorm ferociously broke away, sweeping up the endless power of the ocean. It was like a terrifying snowstorm dragon that swallowed up Hui Tong. Everywhere it passed, the space was completely frozen. The terrifying ice owl attacked endlessly. For the first time, Hui Tong felt a trace of pressure from Yi Shuohen and Chen Wanqin's moves. Amitabha, the abbot of Tiangang Temple, put his palms together and chanted Buddhist mantras. An even more terrifying Buddhist light raged out from his body. A golden Buddhist wheel appeared behind Hui Tong's head. It was like a golden sun, so blinding that people couldn't open their eyes. Wisps of terrifying golden airflow shot out from the Buddha wheel and shot toward the blizzard dragon. They were as dense and sharp as swords. Every time a wisp of golden light pierced through the blizzard dragon, a part of it would be cut off, and large chunks of ice would fall down. Yi Shuohen and Chen Wanqin's Monarch soul fusion technique desperately released the power of the Emperor will. However, they found that the ice destroyed by the golden light could no longer be condensed from water. Every time a part was lost, the power of the Emperor will contained in the snowstorm dragon would drop by a level. Break! Hui Tong's palms parted to both sides. Bang! Everyone saw that the huge and boundless blizzard dragon in the void was completely torn apart, turning into countless ice shards that scattered and disappeared in front of Huitong. At the same time, Yi Shuihan and Chun Wanqin's emperor will dissipated. The endless ocean disappeared, and the ice and snow statues turned back into human bodies. Both of them vomited a mouthful of blood at the same time. Their faces were incomparably pale. A month ago, 300 disciples of the Divine Palace formed the Peacock Divine King Battle Array. Relying on their Monarch soul fusion technique, they used the flowing of ice and water to forcefully defeat the battle array of the direct descendants of the Xianyuan royal family. Now, they used the flowing of ice and water again, but it was broken by a monk. You all step back. Buzz. A sword-like figure flashed out. Showuk appeared in front of Yi Shuihan and Chen Wanqin out of thin air. The brilliant sword calamity Platinum Emperor Lotus bloomed at the soles of his feet. His primordial spirit slowly rotated, exuding a terrifying sword will. Let's switch places and deal with them. With a swoosh, Zhanye's shirtless and majestic body appeared beside Showuk. He held a mighty and fierce giant blade in his hand, and the majestic blade will flowed. The two of them stood side by side and looked straight at Huitong. Let's go. Yi Shuihan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and glanced at the abbot of Tiangang Temple unwillingly. Then, he flew into the air and a water spear appeared in his hand, stabbing towards Emperor Yin. Chen Wanqin, the dog spirit, and the seriously injured Ahe Huang also split up to deal with Fa Zhao and Emperor Yuan of the other forces in the northern border. Although they were very unwilling, Huitong was too strong. They could only leave him to Showuk and Zhanyi to deal with. Benefactors, please step back, Huitong said. In the previous battle, Showuk defeated Emperor Yin, and Zhanyi and Fa Zhao were evenly matched. He saw all of it. These two were obviously stronger than the 6 people just now. But Huitong's face was still calm. Sword of questioning heart. Showuk raised his hand and pointed forward. The sword Calamity Emperor Lotus under his feet rotated, and the sharp and terrifying sword intent became stronger and stronger. His essence, soul, and body seemed to be spewing out endless sword chi. These sword chi all flowed towards his fingertips and condensed layer by layer. Showuk naturally wouldn't be naive enough to think that he could defeat the other party with an ordinary sword strike. His sword of questioning heart required him to gather sword momentum. The stronger the momentum, the stronger the sword intent. This was because Huitong's cultivation was extremely extraordinary. But wanting him to retreat? What a joke. In front of a sword cultivator, there was no retreat. There was only advance. Take my saber. Zhanyi moved first. He could feel that Showuk needed time to gather sword momentum. At the same time as he attacked, rays of light pierced through the major acupoints of his body one after another. Wrists, feet, knees, waist, and so on. He activated the Battle of 9 Palaces Dilly and didn't activate it when he fought with Fa Zhao. But facing Huitong, Zhanyi knew that he had to go all out. An incomparably ferocious saber momentum slashed down, drawing out powerful platinum saber shadows. When Zhanyi attacked, every strike was like a huge wave of saber might. The feeling of power was extremely tyrannical. Huitong took a step forward, welcoming Zhan Ye's saber light. Every saber light slashed down. Huitong didn't raise his hand to resist. He allowed the saber force to slash on his body and was blocked by the protective Buddhist light. Sonorous, slashing sounds could be heard in the void. He took a few steps forward. His Buddhist body didn't move even after being slashed by the saber light. In just a few more steps, he would pass by Showuk and head toward Xinhao. At this moment, an ear-piercing sword chi pierced through. Showuk's sword Calamity Emperor Lotus released tens of thousands of sword intents, which all gathered at the sword finger. The sword of questioning heart pierced forward. The platinum sword chi pierced through the void and arrived in front of Huitong. Huitong's footsteps suddenly stopped. A trace of admiration flashed in his eyes. This sword chi attacked, as if it was directly inside his body. It ignored his protective Buddhist light and pierced through his flesh, stabbing towards his Buddhist heart. The sword sect's lost art, the sword of questioning heart. It killed people, killed the soul, and also killed the heart. Moreover, under the suppression of Sho Wuk's sword intent, the opponent would instinctively feel that their heart had been stabbed. They would temporarily lose their ability to resist, or rather, they wouldn't be able to react in time. This sword could be said to be a true sword of questioning heart. Benefactor, you are fated with my Buddhist sect. Your sword intent is connected to the heart. If you enter the Buddhist sect, you will definitely be an eminent monk. Your achievements will be far above mine. Although he was filled with admiration, it was impossible for Huitong to not resist. He chanted the scripture as a dignified Buddhic light erupted from his heart. A majestic aura gushed out from his body, transforming into a swastika character that shot out from his mouth, blasting towards Chief Wuk. This monk isn't affected by the sword intent. Sho Wuk's expression was somewhat ugly. There was a loud rumble. The swastika character flew halfway and completely disintegrated. It was as if it was hit by an invisible sword chi. At this moment, the spectators below realized that Sho Wuk's sword chi of questioning heart arrived first, and the attack followed closely behind. This sword was really terrifying. The sword intent could kill the heart, and the subsequent attack would cause death. Even so, it was still blocked by Huitong. This monk is so strong. Zhan Yu was so tired that he was panting. He returned to Sho Wuk's side. Just now, he had swung no less than hundreds of times, and every blade force was activated by Battle of the Nine Palaces Dilly. He had consumed a lot of energy. Of course, the power of the blade was also very strong. However, it couldn't cut through Huitong's protective golden light at all. For the sake of Benefactor's wisdom, I can't bear to hit you too hard. Let's give in. Huitong took a step forward again. It meant that he hadn't used his full strength yet. 10,000 swords sky peak. Sho Wuk raised his sword finger to the sky, and the sword lotus under his feet spun crazily. A violent sword chi soared into the sky and blended with the great Tao of the heavens. At this moment, dense sword chi was born. 10,000 sword chi arranged into a formation, hanging upside down in the sky. From afar, the sword formation looked like an inverted mountain. 9 heavens continuous slash. Zhan Yu was also a little angry as he used the ultimate blade technique. This monk looked down on people. Chapter 16-18. Huitong was indeed very strong. He was not like a cultivator from the outside world, but more like a warrior from the divine palace. His Buddha body and Buddha had almost reached the limit of his own realm and could not be strengthened any further. However, this state was somewhat different from the divine palace. The disciples of the divine palace mainly hone their physical bodies and will to a very high level through the many ways of the peak of the way. Therefore, the warriors from the outside world could not match them. Huitong was naturally formed, as if he had always been like this. He did not rely on external forces of heaven and earth to temper himself. His strength was self-contained. Such an opponent was extremely rare. At this time, Sho Wuk and Zhan Yu had to use all their strength. Huitong looked at the two. A swordsman could form a matrix of 10,000 swords with a single thought. The void was filled with terrible rules and will, and the sword was boundless. And the young broadsword emperor was wrapped in the power of a huge wave. The broadsword in his hand seemed to be able to attack and gather momentum at the same time. The momentum of the broadsword overlapped, and one could imagine that each strike would be stronger than the last. These two people were ready to use all their strength. Stubborn. Abbot Huitong's palms overlapped. Above his body, an extremely majestic light of Buddha erupted and swept out. The void hummed, and the sound of the great path rang out. His expression was solemn. He finally looked at his opponent seriously and decided to use his true strength. When the majestic light of Buddha swept out, a huge golden Buddha body descended and enveloped Huitong. At this time, Huitong's body was also covered with a layer of golden liquid. He was like a Buddha statue. His will of Buddha bloomed and resonated with the huge Buddha body. The sound of Sanskrit chants sounded in the sky, as if they were in the palace of the world of Buddha. Go! Showuk shouted. His sword will merged into the sword matrix, and the divine peak of 10,000 swords fell from the sky. Sword chi made ear-piercing whistling sounds, and countless streams of light pierced through the void. From a distance, it looked like a sword peak was inserted into the head of the giant Buddha. Zhang Yi let out a roar and waved the giant broadsword in his hand. Terrifying broadsword chi slashed out, drawing an arc of hundreds of feet. Each strike was like a violent wave, and each strike was more violent than the last. The 10,000 swords fell straight down, and the broadsword chi slashed wildly across the sky. The broadsword and sword crisscrossed, sealing the entire space of the Buddha body. It was the first time that they had worked together. Their attacks were impenetrable and perfect. Countless people were astonished. The combined attack power of these two people was simply terrifying. Even Qin Hao felt a strong sense of threat from the sword and saber moving about. Hui Tong closed his eyes and stood up in the giant Buddha body. Facing the sword aura that filled the sky, he spat out Sanskrit words. Suddenly, the giant Buddha body exploded with golden light. Shackles of Buddhist words appeared out of thin air, turning into endless chains that wrapped around the Buddha body. When the 10,000 sword Empyrean fell, it was blocked by the Buddhist chains, and there was a burst of dense sword aura shattering. Bang, bang, bang. The saber of striking Yi, 9 heavens consecutive slashes, slashed across the huge Buddha body. However, it was as if he had slashed the indestructible body of the Vajra. Every time his saber landed, there would be a terrifying roar, but it was unable to move the Hui Tong Buddha at all. He's actually the strong? Qin Hao's heart was slightly startled, and a ripple appeared in his heart. Wuk and Zhang Yi used their full strength. Even if Ning Tianxing wanted to receive the 10,000 swords Empyrean and 9 heavens consecutive slashes, he would have to pay a certain price. Moreover, the two of them were working together. However, it was difficult to move the Hui Tong Buddha body. This monk's cultivation was at the 6th level of the Yuan Emperor realm. Even though he was 4 levels higher than Wuk and Zhang Yi, his strength was still a little too strong. He is a flawless emperor. His emperor body is flawless, and his Buddhist power is flawless. Even the cultivation techniques that he cultivates have been polished to the limit by him, allowing him to unleash the ultimate power. At his level, in essence, he doesn't have any weaknesses. A voice transmission entered his ears. Senior sister had seen through Hui Tong's essence and was analyzing and preaching the Tao for Qin Hao. Qin Hao took a deep breath. No wonder this monk was so strong. He had yet to attain the Tao of perfection, but he had already attained the flawless Emperor realm. He had broken through the limits of the Emperor realm and entered the next realm of the martial Tao, the ultimate realm. Qin Hao was also clear that Hui Tong's flawless Emperor realm was not the same concept as the flawless Emperor realm. The flawless Emperor realm was the sublimation of the great Tao and Emperor realm. To comprehend the power of the heavenly Tao, Hui Tong's strength and state of mind were far from enough. Even so, his current state was almost equivalent to a miniature version of the flawless Emperor realm. They're going to be defeated. This monk is just right for you to test your skills. Miuri transmitted her voice again. Qin Hao had to be the one to deal with him. He could also see if the Divine Palace's 4th-layer Emperor Realm disciple was stronger, or if the 6th-layer flawless Emperor Realm disciple from the outside world was stronger. After all, the disciples of Migre's palace, who were jointly cultivated by the 7 Peak Masters, were actually aiming for the flawless martial Tao. Qin Hao and Hui Tong were actually the same kind of people. The difference was that Qin Hao came from the Divine Palace, while Hui Tong cultivated the flawless Emperor realm. There was still some realm difference between the two, but the impact was not great. Boom! There was a deafening roar. In the void, the entire 10,000 swords celestial peak collapsed and was annihilated on the huge Buddha body. Tens of thousands of rule sword chi did not pierce the Buddha body. Showuk's face was extremely pale, and his whole body was drenched as if he had been drenched in rain. His legs were a little unstable, but then his whole body turned into a beam of platinum sword chi and flew into the sky. This battle had a great impact on him. Obviously, he was not willing to give up because he still had one last sword, the Emperor Realm body as a sword. Puff! He spat out a mouthful of blood. Zhang Ye's 9 blades had been used, and the sword will also receded like a wave. Along with the shackles of Buddha's words, it whipped Zhang Ye's body. Infinite Buddhist power blasted into his body. Zhang Yi was like a falling leaf, forcefully whipped down by Huitong. It was unknown how many bones had been broken by this strike. However, a dazzling beam of sword light fell from the sky. Shou Wuk used the Emperor Realm body as a sword, and the natural rules in his body erupted to the limit. The sword chi whistled down, and with a clang, it collided with the shackles of Buddha's body and broke one of the chains. The platinum brilliance above the sword chi was extremely sharp, and it continued to pierce down. The second, the third, the shackles of Buddha's words continued to shatter, unable to stop it. Shou Wuk used his body as a sword, and his momentum was unprecedentedly strong as it pierced into the Buddha body. But that was all. The sword chi pierced into the huge Buddha body, and his whole body stopped in midair and could no longer fall. You have done your best. Huitong looked up at Shou Wuk, and with a wave of his hand, an extremely powerful golden beam blasted upwards, heavily imprinting itself on Shou Wuk's chest. Just like Zhang Yi, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and like a falling leaf, he tumbled high into the sky. Monk, you are courting death. A terrifying halberd beam burst out, and it was extremely resplendent. Just as Shou Wuk was sent flying, who would have thought that there was another figure hiding behind him, following the burst of sword that broke through the layers of defense and into the huge Buddha body. It was Qin Yun. Seeing Zhang Yi and Shou Wuk heavily injured, Qin Yun's eyes turned red. They did not expect to encounter such a major setback in this battle. Although he knew that senior sister Miori was around, and that nothing would happen to anyone, Qin Yun still found it difficult to suppress the anger in his heart. His Emperor Realm laws fused into the Xianyuan halberd, and extremely thick petrification laws covered the halberd, accumulating layer after layer. In a blink of an eye, it was as though he was holding a mountain in his hand, and with the mountain in his arms, he thrust it towards Abbot Huitong's head. Rumble! A terrifying shattering sound rang out. Huitong raised his Buddha palm and slammed it towards the top of his head. The huge rocky mountain that was pressed against his palm began to crumble bit by bit. Qin Yun howled as he continued to charge forward. The distance between the two continued to shrink until the rocky mountain was completely shattered under Huitong's palm, revealing an extremely sharp halberd. Qin Yun's entire body was fused with dilly, and he wanted to pierce through Huitong's palm and kill him. Huitong stared at the Xianyuan halberd. His left hand turned into a claw, and he grabbed it directly. His right hand stretched out, and a heavy palm struck Qin Yun's chest, shattering his clothes and sending him flying out from the huge Buddha body. Good weapon, Huitong praised, and the joy on his face was self-evident. However, he was unable to pull the Xianyuan halberd closer to him. At this moment, he looked up and was shocked to discover that another person had appeared in front of him. This person had a head full of silver hair, and his face was proud and aloof. His temperament was like an immortal, and the other end of the halberd was firmly grasped in his hand. This halberd is not suitable for you, Qin Hao said as he stretched out his palm. Red lotus fire surged, and a blood-colored devil flame palm print whizzed over. Huitong's expression changed slightly. To be able to break through the Buddha body's defense, this person's cultivation level was definitely not below that of the Sword Arch. He similarly struck out with his palm, and Buddhist light flourished, clashing with Qin Hao's palm. The two Yuan Qi, one gold and one blood, were particularly eye-catching. Bang! There was a heavy roar in the void as endless blood-red, demonic flames mixed with the golden light of Buddhism radiated outwards. The giant Buddha body disintegrated as a terrifying shockwave spread outwards, sweeping through all the battles in the void. Anyone who was affected, whether it was Qi Xiaohua, Yi Shuihan, Gu Kui, Hall Master Lu Xing, the Palace Master of Juyan Palace, or even the Palace Master and Vice Palace Master of Juyan Palace, all of them spat out blood as they retreated. Patron, what a deep dilly. Hui Tong retreated hundreds of feet as he looked down at his right hand. There were flashes of blood-colored flames on it, and it was filled with an extremely powerful corrosive force. His skin and flesh were torn apart as he immediately knitted his brows tightly together. Devil Flame. Qin Hao stood there calmly as his white clothes fluttered. He flung his hand behind him, and the Xianyuan halberd landed in his palm. Qin Hao, be careful of this monk, said Qin Hao as he took the halberd. Qin Yin said as he received the halberd. His clothes were torn, and a deep palm print could be seen on his chest. If Qin Hao had not rushed over and helped him remove the Buddhist power, this palm might have penetrated his emperor body. A monk should be benevolent. Reverend, aren't you a little too heavy-handed? Qin Hao's aura fluctuated slightly as the blood in his body surged. He had felt Hui Tong's power in that palm strike. A flawless arch was indeed extraordinary. Hui Tong looked up at Qin Hao, who was behind Qin Hao. He looked at the Xianyuan halberd in his hand and still could not look away. Then, he took a deep breath and suppressed the desire in his heart. He put his palms together and said, Amit Ba, if Patron Qin is willing to surrender, this old monk can allow them to leave safely. They were naturally referring to Shou Wuk, Xiaogua, and the others. Today, Qin Hao had come to the northern frontier to cause trouble. He had come straight to Yangui City and destroyed the northern Yan Imperial Palace. No matter what, he cannot be allowed to leave. However, the many emperors who came to protect Qin Hao did not commit any major mistakes. Buddha was merciful. Even though he was unwilling, Hui Tong was still able to let go of his obsession with the arch weapon and let Qin Yun and the others leave unscathed. Surrender? Just because you said so? Qin Hao shook his head and looked at Abbot Hui Tong. He said, whether my people leave or not is not up to you. Chapter 16:19. The boundless space quieted down, and everyone stopped fighting. Countless eyes looked from the city to the sky, all focused on Qin Hao and Abbot Hui Tong. Today, Qin Hao led a group of monarchs here to settle the old grudge with the northern Yan, but Hui Tong asked him to surrender. Otherwise, none of the people he brought with him would be able to escape safely. Qin Hao smiled. This monk was so arrogant. However, arrogance was built on the foundation of strength, and he had the right to be arrogant. Raging demonic flames surged, burning fiercely, and filled the endless void. Qin Hao bathed in the red lotus overlord fire, his silver hair flying, and his eyes exuding the domineering aura of an emperor as he looked directly at the abbot of Tiangang Temple. Hui Tong looked at the opposite side. Qin Hao was responding to him with action. In this battle, he would not retreat, and it was impossible for him to surrender. Amitba, a solemn Buddhist chant sounded. Hui Tong sat cross-legged in the void, his Buddha body raging with golden light. He had tasted Qin Hao's power, which was far above that of the Sword Emperor. It was incomparably powerful and domineering. The battle between them would be a fierce contest. The endless golden light gathered stronger and stronger. Hui Tong's body flowed with the supreme Buddhist Dharma. With the word Jia, an incomparably terrifying Buddhist aura suppressed the heavens, and the earth trembled. Then, a Buddhist golden bell, surrounded by Sanskrit, appeared. It was huge and boundless, and the Sanskrit characters flickered and rotated. Between heaven and earth, the sound of the golden bell rang. Dang! As the sound spread, the blood of countless cultivators in the sky and below boiled, as if it was about to seep out of their pores. They could not suppress it at all, and were all bleeding from their 7 orifices due to Hui Tong's fierce Buddhist aura. Qin Hao only felt a terrifying sound wave rushing at him, and the red lotus overlord fire around him flew backward as if it was swept away by a gust of wind. He felt dizzy and shaken. Dang! The Buddhist bell rang for the second time. Xiaogua and the others were forced to stop. They released their emperor aura to block it, and felt that their souls were violently attacked. Qin Hao's emperor's spirit trembled, and he also felt the Buddhist aura invading his emperor body. The sound of the Buddhist bell echoed in his mind, attacking his soul again and again. His aura became chaotic because of this, and he guessed that the Buddhist bell was Huitong's soul. Dang! Another sound rang out. Between the heavens and earth, a storm of bell chimes swept out. Golden light erupted from the Buddhist bell, enveloping the entire sky. Everyone was engulfed by the Buddhist light. In an instant, Xiaogua, Yi Shuihan, and the others coughed out blood one after another. The emperor light around them weakened, revealing painful expressions. Clearly, they were injured by the Huitong Buddhist energy. Qin Hao's soul was shaken. When this bell chime entered his ears, it carried with it surging Buddhist energy and actually invaded his will, wanting to destroy his Emperor Dao intent. However, how could Huitong's cultivation level shake the emperor's will of a flawless great emperor in his previous life? Bang! Qin Hao took a powerful step forward, and a terrible dragon roar filled his body. A dragon-shaped phantom coiled around his body, and the power of the dragon continued to strengthen his flesh and blood. The dragon scales on his face were faintly discernible. An even more violent emperor's aura erupted. The starlight of the great path sprinkled down from the sky, and the stars moved, covering the entire world of the Buddhist light. Qin Hao punched out, and the fist light flew out, condensing into a violent meteorite that whistled forward. It slammed heavily on the giant Buddhist bell, igniting a terrible explosion. The Sanskrit characters flashing on the Buddhist bell were shattered. Bang! Qin Hao punched out a second time, and the power of the Great Path meteorite around him was even stronger. The fist light hit the Buddhist bell until it shook wildly, and a layer of dense cracks appeared on it. This scene caused the expressions of many spectators to change. Break! The power of the dragon increased, and Qin Hao's emperor body seemed to contain an ancient dragon. The terrible power merged with the meteorite rules, and the starry sky of the Great Path trembled. Everyone saw a beam of fist light pass through the Buddhist bell, penetrating it forcefully, and blasted in front of Huitong. So strong. Countless people were shocked. Qin Hao's rising aura and power had completely overshadowed that of Abbot Huitong. Emperor Qi, who was far away from the battle and hiding in the void, was extremely shocked. Qin Hao's improvement was too shocking. Not only had he ascended to the emperor path, but he was also evenly matched with the number 1 monk of the northern frontier. 5 years ago, he had only been a Yuan venerate. At that time, Emperor Yin and Emperor Qi had personally come to Liaodu. Even though Qin Hao's attitude was neither servile nor overbearing, he was actually not worthy of their attention. Now, he had actually grown to such a terrifying extent. Fortunately, Old Man is not loyal. Pavilion Master Jiang wiped the large amount of sweat from his forehead. He was sweating like rain, and his heart was about to suffocate. His legs were trembling. Qin Hao was too frightening. Boom! The fist radiance pierced through the air like a Great Path meteorite, carrying the power of the stars in the sky as it headed straight for Huitong. Huitong sat cross-legged in the air with his eyes closed. A terrifying whistling sound blasted in front of him. He put his palms together, and the Buddha will around him surged crazily. A golden pillar of Buddha light descended from the sky and blocked it. It collided with the meteor fist aura. Suddenly, the fist aura exploded, and Qin Hao's attack was blocked. However, the pillar of Buddha light also broke from the middle. Countless fist auras scraped past Huitong's face, leaving behind small wounds. However, neither of them stopped. At the top of the void, one by one, the Buddha pillars descended and fell straight toward Qin Hao. Every Buddha pillar contained an extremely terrifying and flawless Buddhist power. Not only was Huitong's emperor body flawless, but his emperor intent and cultivation techniques were also extremely powerful. He had no weaknesses. The dense Buddha pillars fell from the sky like a storm. There was no blind spot for Qin Hao to rest and take a breather. Qin Hao looked up at the sky. The Buddha pillars covered the sky and the sun. The space particles contained destructive Buddhist power. It was a terrifying attack. Qin Hao took a mystical step, using the water and wind god step. As he landed, the will of the emperor merged with the great path. The entire northern Yin imperial city trembled under his feet. His movements seemed slow, but he was everywhere. His speed was so fast that it was impossible to predict. Even the will of the emperor could not lock onto him. No matter how many Buddha pillars fell from the sky, none of them could hit him. Abbot Huitong opened his eyes and looked at Qin Hao's silhouettes all over the sky. Every time the Buddha pillar crashed down, a silhouette would be destroyed. It was just an afterimage. This son-in-law of Emperor Zhao's had reached the pinnacle of profoundness. Suddenly, Huitong sensed an extremely dangerous aura approaching. Buddhist power gathered in his eyes, and a bright golden light burst from his eyes. Under the observation of the Buddha's eyes, he found that Qin Hao was already in front of him. The fist radiance flashing with great path meteorites blasted toward him. Buzz, 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 buzz. A row of dense Buddha pillars fell in front of Huitong, turning into an indestructible golden wall of Buddhism. Just when Huitong had just formed a defense, Qin Hao waved his fist. There was a terrible light piercing through. Between heaven and earth, an extremely turbulent power suddenly filled the air. Dili opened the fifth palace in the Battle of the Nine Palaces. It complemented with the power of the dragon and mixed with the momentum of the Great Path meteorites. With a boom, it broke through Huitong's golden wall of Buddha's light. All the Buddha pillars were directly shattered and imprinted on his chest. Everyone saw that the Buddha's body, which was sitting cross-legged in the void, slid backward wildly. Blood slowly flowed from the corner of Huitong's mouth. His square face showed pain for the first time. He was blasted back 100 feet before he could stabilize his body. But this punch still did not disperse the Buddhist power on him. Too strong, Qi Yuan said. Not only was Huitong strong, but Qin Hao's growth was also far beyond imagination. He remembered that when they escaped from the Divine Palace, Qin Hao's realm was still suppressed by Xiao Han, Shou Wuk, Ning Tianxing, and Qingji Han. At that time, their strength was still evenly matched. But at this moment, Qin Hao's surging emperor Qi surpassed that of Shou Wuk. He had broken through to the fourth layer of Emperor Yuan. Even Abbot Huitong was beginning to feel overwhelmed by this burst of power. So many Divine Palace disciples besieged Huitong, and their emperor techniques were overwhelming, but he was still calm and composed. He even defeated the joint forces of Shou Wuk and Zhang Yi. Qin Hao was able to suppress Huitong a little by himself. Now, among all the juniors in the 4 regions of the continent, Qin Hao was basically unrivaled. Even Ning Tianxing couldn't do it. Swish! Swish! Just as everyone was shocked, several emperor lights tore through the space and descended from outside Yingwei City. In the blink of an eye, they had already arrived in the middle of the battle, exuding the aura of Emperor Yuan. They were Emperor Shao of the northern border, Duan Zhanfei, Emperor Luo Shui of the western Liang, and his wife, Xiang Yue. Father, mother. When Yi Shuihan saw Yi Long Yuan, he took a step forward, and with a flash of light, he had already arrived in front of the two. Father, Uncle Duan. A beautiful figure riding on the 7-colored demon Sparrow's divine light appeared. Xiao Han couldn't hide any longer and flew over as well. You, Xiao Yi, and the others were shocked. They looked at the battle situation one by one. Many top figures of the northern border were present. Hall Master Lu Xing, Palace Master Chao of the Jian Palace, Emperor Qi, Emperor Yin, Pavilion Master Jiang, and even Xiao Yi stared at Yin Zhu and Fu Di. His strong vigilance made him tremble a little. Did these 2 old monsters really come out of seclusion? In order to not worry you, we came with our boss in advance to deal with this matter. I didn't expect you to still come. Yi Shuihan smiled. Their battleship was fast enough, and Yi Long Yuan had received the news that it would take some time for him to rush from the western Liang to the northern border to see Xiao Yi. They thought that before that, they could smoothly solve all the problems and go back to see Xiao Yi. They didn't expect that a difficult monk, Hui Tong, would appear. Nonsense, Xiao Yi said in a low voice. He looked ahead and saw Qin Hao confronting Hui Tong of the northern border. Just a moment ago, when they tore the space apart, they had already seen the scene of Qin Hao blasting Hui Tong away. Other than being shocked, they were also a little scared. This abbot of the Tiangang Temple was very powerful. He was said to be invincible in the imperial realm if the ancestors of the various clans of the northern border didn't come out. Even though Xiao Yi had never fought with him, he knew that he was very powerful. However, Qin Hao dared to bring a group of children to the nest of the Murong family in the northern Yin to fight, and even directly fought with Abbot Huitong. How could they not be afraid when they thought of this? Qin Hao looked at Xiao Yi and smiled. The emperor's light around him flickered. He was not injured at all. Umitba, a Buddhist chant interrupted everyone's conversation. Seeing Xiao Yi come personally, Huitong's golden eyes immediately stared at him. He faced Yin Zhu and Fu Di and said, "Both of you, I have done my best in today's battle. I will leave the rest to you. Buddhists have their missions." After that, Abbot Huitong stepped forward and walked toward Xiao Yi step by step. At this moment, his body once again erupted with an even more solemn Buddhist power. Yin Zhu watched quietly. This monk Huitong was really going to attack Xiao Yi. However, leave the rest to him and Fu Di. He also wanted to deal with it, but there was a strong emperor's will above his head. It was like a peerless sword. If he moved even a little, it could slash down. Chapter 16:20. Yin Zhu and Fu Di didn't move. It wasn't that they didn't want to, but they were afraid. They knew that whoever moved first would be suppressed by the powerful emperor will. In the boundless void, only Hui Tong of Tiangang Temple was walking alone. He approached Xiao Yi step by step, the Buddhist golden light around him exerting great pressure on everyone. Many people looked at this scene in confusion. The person who stirred up trouble today was Qin Hao. Abbot Hui Tong should be looking for Qin Hao to discuss martial arts. Why was he oppressing Xiao Yi? Qin Hao also didn't understand. He used the water wind step and stood in front of Xiao Yi and Xiao Han, facing Hui Tong. The battle between the two hadn't ended. He couldn't let them attack others, not to mention that his father-in-law was behind them. Benefactor Qin, it's already the Buddha's mercy that I don't want to be your enemy. Don't stop me. Otherwise, don't blame Buddhism for being merciless. Hui Tong's footsteps suddenly stopped as he shouted in a deep voice. Except for Yin Zhu and Fu Di, he didn't care about anyone else here. He would attack directly. But as for how strong Qin Hao's cultivation was, he knew the answer in his heart. Why? Qin Hao asked. Am I not your target? Why did he choose Xiao Yi? Benefactor Xiao cultivated the demonic way. He is guilty. Today, let me use the Buddhist way to purify Benefactor Zhao's emperor way, Hui Tong answered. His tone was very determined. Demons and Buddhas had been at odds since ancient times. This was the way of Buddhism. Qin Hao smiled. Purify Xiao Yi's emperor way? To put it bluntly, he would destroy Xiao Yi's cultivation. This monk was ruthless. Qin Hao, get out of the way. Xiao Yi stood out. His emperor will bloomed, and black emperor light appeared on his body. It was no secret that he cultivated the demonic way. Everyone in the northern borderline knew. If it weren't for this demonic way, he wouldn't have been able to subdue Daliao in these 10 years. Since this battle came to him, he wouldn't back down. However, Qin Hao took a step forward and walked in front of Xiao Yi. Hui Tong immediately frowned and said, If Benefactor Qin continues to obstruct the Buddhist sect, I will use all my strength and will not hold back. There was a faint threat in his tone. He would do anything to kill Qin Hao. Full power. Do you think you're the only one who hasn't used your full power? Qin Hao roared. An extremely shocking dragon roar resounded from his imperial body. Terrifying dragon might rippled out as a layer of dragon scales covered his face. His entire right arm transformed into a sharp dragon claw. In the previous battle with Hui Tong, he did not even activate his dragon form and only used 50% of his dragon power. Full power? All right, let's show Huitong what it means to go all out. The terrifying dragon roar shook the void, and the sound waves radiated out. Everyone covered their ears, feeling as if there was an evil dragon churning wildly in their minds, trying to tear their souls apart. Beams of bright light erupted one after another, piercing through all the major acupoints on Qin Hao's body. The Battle of the Nine Palaces dilly filled his bloodline, and the 8 palaces were all opened, evolving into the battle god physique. The terrifying will of the battle god descended from the 9 heavens and attached itself to Qin Hao's body. From afar, it was actually a huge phantom of the battle god that enveloped him. Endless battle intent filled the air, and the phantom was dazzling all over, looking insufferably arrogant. With the operation of the martial lord's path of falling stars, the sky completely turned into a starry sky Dao realm. The stars in the sky flickered, and the power of the stars fell on the phantom of the battle god. When Qin Hao raised his fist, the great Dao shook violently. The phantom of the battle god also punched forward. The fist condensed into a huge meteorite, and flames surged as it blasted towards the abbot of Tiangang Temple. At this moment, the sky seemed to have collapsed, and no one could stand steadily. Just the airflow when the phantom of the battle god punched was enough to make the Yuan Emperor's present fall back uncontrollably, including Xiao Yi. Huitong's expression suddenly changed wildly. The blood in his meridians surged wildly, and waves of divine Buddhist power rushed to the outside world. His body burst out with monstrous Buddhist light, condensing into a huge Buddha body. Huitong was in the center of the Buddha body, and he raised his palm and slammed it forward. The giant Buddha also slammed its palm forward. In an instant, the meteorite fist of the phantom of the battle god and the palm of the Buddha statue collided. Bang! 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 Sonic booms exploded everywhere in the void, and the space shattered like a mirror, revealing a series of terrifying faults. At this moment, even people as strong as Yan Zhu and Fu Di widened their eyes. Powerful emperors will bloomed, forming a protective aura around their bodies to resist the power of the two. As for Xiaogua and the others, they had already slipped away and hid far away. Poof! Pavilion Master Zhang's cultivation was a little weaker at the peak of the Renwang realm. He hadn't entered the Imperial realm, so his speed was naturally not as fast as the many emperors present. His body was only slightly swept by the aftershock, and he felt as if a layer of his skin was peeled off. The feeling was indescribably wonderful. At this moment, the battle god's meteorite fist slammed into the giant palm of the Buddha statue. The wild power of the great path burst out violently, and the Buddha's palm was directly shattered into nothingness. Then, the punch continued forward and penetrated the body of the giant Buddha. Countless people in the city were horrified to see that a huge, transparent hole had been blasted through the golden body of the Buddha statue. The punch finally landed on Abbot Huitong. Poof! A mouthful of Buddha's blood sprayed out, and the Buddhist light that enveloped Huitong's body was completely dispersed. He staggered back, and as he retreated, he couldn't help but cough violently. His bald head was covered with blue veins, and thick blood vessels seemed to be bursting out of his skin. Obviously, Qin Hao's attack had exceeded the maximum range that he could withstand. The abbot of Tianfang Temple, the divine monk Huitong, who was known to be invincible in the imperial realm, was defeated in the end. Qin Hao only used one punch to penetrate his Buddha body, dissipate his Buddhist light, and seriously injured him, causing him to vomit blood repeatedly. But he previously said that he wanted Qin Hao to surrender. Otherwise, none of the emperors present today would be able to escape safely from under his nose. Just now, he even vaguely threatened Qin Hao not to obstruct the Buddhist sect because he didn't use his full strength. And now this was his full strength? With one punch, Qin Hao's Buddhist power was completely dispersed. He frantically retreated, coughing and vomiting blood. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he couldn't withstand a single blow. Shocking. Incomparably shocking. Even Yin Zhu and Fu Di were shocked by Qin Hao's punch. Who would have thought that the abbot of Tiangang Temple would be unscathed after being besieged by more than 10 emperors? In the end, he couldn't withstand the power of Qin Hao's punch. At this moment, Hui Tong retreated dozens of meters in a row before he could stabilize his feet. He felt that all the bones in his body seemed to have been shattered by Qin Hao. He was equally shocked as he looked at the white-haired young man in front of him with a puzzled look. "What?" he asked. He knew that his talent wasn't high, and he might not be able to step into the first level of the imperial realm in his lifetime. Therefore, he cultivated Buddhism diligently and endured what ordinary people couldn't endure. He forged a flawless body, cultivated a flawless Buddhist intent, and cultivated the supreme Buddhist techniques. Everything was tempered to the limit by him. The path he walked was a difficult emperor's Tao that emperors of the continent never dared to try. Because this path took too much time, one might be stuck on this path for the rest of one's life. Even so, Hui Tong had no regrets. His hard work finally allowed him to cultivate a flawless Tao that far surpassed that of other emperors. There was no weakness in this path. But how could he be defeated by Qin Hao, a fourth-level imperial realm cultivator? He didn't understand. Even Hui Tong's eyes were confused, because there is also a gap between the limits. Your so-called limit is only your own limit, but how can you know how high the limits of others are? Qin Hao said. This sentence was a bit cruel, but it was the truth. Even if Hui Tong went through a lot of hardships to become a flawless emperor, his talent was limited. If he met an emperor who was more talented than him and had also forged a flawless Tao, he would be defeated. It was only natural that he would be defeated. Hui Tong's face was sad. He understood. He looked at Qin Hao and said, "Even so, I want to purify Emperor Zhao's sins. Why did Benefactor Qin stop me?" He had already said that he wouldn't be enemies with Qin Hao. He even let Qin Hao go. In his opinion, Qin Hao should be the same. They shouldn't interfere with each other. Sin? May I ask, Grandmaster, what sin did Emperor Zhao commit? Qin Hao asked. Cultivating diabolism is a sin. Hui Tong said righteously. Diabolism was difficult to control. Zhao, he hadn't committed a big mistake yet, but it didn't mean that he wouldn't in the future. As a Buddhist monk, he should nip the danger in the bud and eliminate disasters for the world. Ridiculous. According to Grandmaster, everyone who cultivates martial arts is a sin. Qin Hao found it ridiculous. Was it a sin to possess martial arts? There were millions of martial artists in the world. As long as martial arts existed, there would always be the law of the jungle. Yes, everyone is a sin. Hui Tong gritted his teeth and said, Grandmaster, have you ever thought that you are also a sin? Qin Hao said seriously. Hui Tong also cultivated martial arts. Umitba. Hui Tong closed his eyes and refused to answer. Don't pretend to be noble by saying Umitba. Let me ask you, does the so-called Buddha in your heart rely on the profound Buddhist power to force people to do as you wish? Does the common people in the world live by your Buddhist Tao? Qin Hao said, was it not a sin to force others? I entered Buddhism and became a Buddhist. I persuade people to do good and do good for the heavens. Is it a sin to lead people to do good? Hui Tong asked. There is no need to use force to lead people to do good. Since you cultivate Buddhism, go back and recite the scriptures to persuade people to do good. There are Buddhist scriptures to save all living beings. Grandmaster, why do you need to use force to suppress and force others? Hui Tong's face turned red. How could he not understand this? However, in the world of martial arts cultivation, what was the use of talking? Without strength, how could one survive? If you use force to force others, what is the difference between you and other martial artists? If you reach the peak of Tao in the future and become an imperial lord, will the world follow your will? If you don't, are all the people evil and have to be killed? Is your Buddha a Buddha or a demon? Qin Hao said. Hui Tong spat out a mouthful of hot Buddha blood. Qin Hao's words attacked his soul and pierced into his Buddha heart. It was as if a disgusting mud was poured on the Buddha statue in his heart, as if it had turned into an ugly demon. He cultivated Buddhism wholeheartedly, but in the end, he became a demon in the eyes of the world. Were the people wrong, or was he wrong? Could it be that Buddha was really so ugly and sinful? Huitong was at a loss. His Buddhist heart had lost its direction. He felt that cultivating martial arts was a mistake. Especially when he was being questioned by Qin Hao, he could not help but sneak a glance at the Emperor Xinyuan halberd in Qin Yun's hand from the corner of his eyes. His heart was filled with a strong desire to possess it. At this moment, Huitong understood that he was guilty. Bang! The palm imbued with Buddhist energy heavily slammed into Huitong's chest. Terrifying Buddhist energy swept through his entire body. Streaks of bloody light continuously exploded from Huitong's body. This palm had shattered all of his meridians and destroyed nearly 1,000 years of cultivation. Just as Qin Hao said, in the future, he would only recite Buddhism and not martial arts. There was no strong or weak, so there was no other obsession. The solemn Kasaya was full of blood. Huitong destroyed his emperor's Tao, shocking everyone. Even Qin Hao looked at him in disbelief. This monk's style of doing things was too bigoted. Chapter 16:21. In the face of major issues, Huitong's position and motive were not wrong. His worries were not groundless, but his methods were too extreme and could be solved in another way. Who would have thought that he would destroy his own cultivation just because of a disagreement? A flawless emperor crippled himself just like that. His method was decisive and without hesitation, which made Qin Hao feel a sense of pity. In the case of similar realms, he was able to display dragon form, open the 8 palaces, evolve the Dharma body of the god of war, and use the rules of the great path of falling stars. It could be said that no one before Huitong had such qualifications. How many flawless people could there be in the world? It was too difficult for Wuk to reach this position in the martial arts world. It was completely imaginable that Huitong had experienced hardships. With one hand in front of him, Qin Hao slightly bowed to Abbot Huitong. Putting aside all disputes, the courage of the monk was worthy of respect. Big Brother is amazing. With just a few words, you induced the monk to destroy the emperor's path. Siowa narrowed his eyes. That was too showy. What a sharp tongue. Wonderful. Abbot, Abbot. Fa Zhao and many monks of Tiangang Temple stood in the air in front of Huitong, looking at the abbot covered in Buddha's blood. His body trembled because he destroyed his own cultivation. Their faces were full of grief. I am no longer qualified to be the abbot of Tiangang Temple. Fa Zhao, from now on, Tiangang Temple depends on you. Remember, monks only cultivate Buddhism, not martial arts. Huitong's breath was weak, and his appearance had changed drastically. He had lost Dili, and his body was rapidly aging every second. Amitabha. Fa Zhao put his palms together and solemnly chanted Buddha's name. He knew in his heart that without the protection of martial arts, the abbot had returned to a mortal body and did not have much time left to live. Looking up at Qin Hao, Fa Zhao took a deep breath and dismissed all thoughts. He said, from now on, Tiangang Temple will no longer be involved in any mortal disputes in the northern border. Benefactors, take care of yourselves. With that, the emperor's light bloomed around him, and he left with a group of monks protecting Huitong. From now on, everything outside the temple had nothing to do with the temple. The space fell silent. Countless people looked at the backs of the monks of Tiangang Temple as they left. Huitong's cultivation was crippled. Were they going to leave just like that? Yanzu's expression at this moment was particularly interesting. Confusion, anger, and even hatred. His heart was full of mixed feelings. Not only did Huitong not destroy Xiao Yi's emperor's path, but he had also destroyed his own cultivation. What a muddle-headed thing. However, the truly powerful person was Qin Hao. With just a few words, even the eminent monk of Tiangang Temple, Huitong, couldn't withstand it. He questioned his Buddha's heart, lost his way, and ended up in such a miserable state. Xiao Yi's son-in-law not only had extraordinary strength, but his murderous skills were also fierce enough. Whoosh, whoosh, suddenly, the sound of a flute rang out, breaking the silence. The flute's music was especially ear-piercing and reached straight into one's heart. The chaotic melody contained a fiendish power. Everyone felt like they were in the midst of a dance of demons. Great demons from beyond the heavens appeared in front of them as they slashed with gigantic scythes in hand. Blazing white scythe beams slashed into their bodies and split apart their souls. Instantly, Hall Master Meteor, Absolute Sound Palace's deputy palatial lords, and Emperor Yin all had their ears covered. Their eyes turned red as their expressions turned hideous and terrifying. All of them were in a state of chaos. It was none other than Yaoguang Peak's Empyrean Dharma, Heavenly Fiend tune. Die! Just as Su Jin played the Heavenly Fiend divine tune, infusing the laws into his soul and corroding Hall Master Meteor's soul, Qin Yun wielded the Xianyuan halberd as a powerful Empyrean beam slashed diagonally across his neck. Immediately, Hall Master Meteor's head flew up as petrified dilly destroyed his soul. Hall Master Meteor was dead. Yi Shuhin's water spear stabbed out as the dog demon spewed out a river of lava. At the same time, it struck Emperor Yin. Accompanied by a tragic cry, a protective Empyrean light bloomed and blocked the attack, saving Emperor Yan's life and time. Although Emperor Yin was not dead, the Murong family's ancestral Dharch artifact was destroyed. Swish! Frost Dao intent descended, sealing space as it enveloped Palatial Lord Chao and Deputy Palatial Lord. Solid ice gradually inundated their bodies. Before they could struggle out of the Heavenly Fiend divine tune, they were turned into ice sculptures. Gu Kuei and the Centaur brothers roared as 3 ferocious fist blasts tore through the sky. The resplendent dilly blasted straight at the figures in the ice sculptures. At this moment, Su Jin's flute melody changed. Musical notes jumped out from the void and circled around the ice sculpture, forming a protective layer of Emperor's light. The 3 fists slammed into the ice sculpture, breaking through the protective layer, but the ice sculpture remained intact. "What are you doing?" Gu Kuei roared at Su Jin. "They don't deserve to die. Let them live," Su Jin said. The Emperor's spirit dissipated and the flute in his hand disappeared. He was also influenced by Hui Tong, which reminded him of the Yaoguang Peak. Under the Great Tao, martial arts were equal. The northern borderline needed Jian Palace to pass down the orthodoxy. Humph! Gu Kuei shook off his fist and strode away. Ah-Hei and Huang looked at each other. Although they couldn't guess what Su Jin was thinking, Su Jin was now Qin Hao's favorite. He had his reasons for doing things, so they didn't attack again. Chen Wanqin chuckled and also dispersed the Frost Dao intent. The ice sculptures melted and released Palatial Lord Chao and Deputy Palatial Lord. "Thank you for not killing us." Palatial Lord Chao was shocked. He bowed to Su Jin from afar. If it weren't for Su Jin's will, he would have died under Gu Kuei's fist. Deputy Palatial Lord also bowed. Thinking of what happened in the hall, his face turned red. They both cultivated sound techniques, but in terms of cultivation and temperament, he was inferior to this young flute master. Su Jin didn't say anything. He looked at Qin Hao. Qin Hao nodded slightly, indicating that he didn't do anything wrong. The forces of Beijiang were originally bewitched by the Murong clan. Since they didn't cause any harm to Shao Yi, they should be lenient. There was no need to kill them all. Otherwise, Beijiang's martial arts would decline and fall behind the southern region by thousands of years, just like Western Liang. Yin Zhu's beard fluttered as he glared at the people of Jian Palace. Did they betray the Murong clan? The monks of Tiangang Temple had all left, the lord of Liuxing Temple was killed, and the palace lord of Jian Palace and deputy palatial lord had betrayed them. The Beijiang alliance had collapsed with the arrival of Qin Hao. Attack! Palace lord and Yin Zhu looked at each other. For now, they had to attack even if they didn't want to. Although the emperor's will above them was very strong, it was not necessarily stronger than theirs. Swoosh! Swoosh! 2 thick beams of emperor's light moved almost at the same time. One flew toward Qin Hao, and the other went straight for Xiao Yi. Yin Zhu and Palace Lord knew very well that if they could defeat either Qin Hao or Xiao Yi, they wouldn't lose. When Yin Zhu and Palace Lord attacked, the dilly that filled the air was extremely powerful. It filled the heavens and the earth, and the great path shook violently. It was unstoppable. Their auras were vaguely comparable to the Emperor realm, and the pressure they exerted on everyone was extremely strong. From afar, Emperor Qi's face turned pale with fright when he saw this. Xiao Yi sighed. Even if he came, he couldn't change the outcome. He silently looked at Duan Zhanfei. Emperor's light burst out from their bodies. They wanted to stop them and buy time for Qin Hao and the others to retreat. They could die, but Qin Hao and the rest of the younger generation couldn't. Do you think the old man doesn't exist? Suddenly, an old man's roar came from the sky. It was powerful and domineering. A beam of saber light tore through the sky and slashed down at an unbelievable speed. The boundless saber light flashed and slashed in the middle of Yin Zhu, Fu Di, and Xiao Yi. The terrifying saber chi wreaked havoc and set off a terrifying saber light storm. Before the four of them could even get close, numerous wounds appeared on their faces, and they were all forced to retreat madly. Who is it? Yin Zhu was shocked. Palace Lord wiped away the blood on his face. Palace Lord's expression was extremely serious. When he was threatened by the Emperor's will earlier, he could feel how powerful the other party was. But when he actually attacked, how could he be so strong? The one who proved your Tao for you. The blade light storm dissipated, revealing the body of an old man. He had white hair, a white beard, and a white robe. Two long white eyebrows hung down to his temples. He stood with his hands behind his back. His body was extremely strong, like a powerful emperor's blade. It was the leader of the Zhang clan, the Imperial Lord Zhang Guanghe. At this time, behind Zhang Guang, he stood Zhang Ye's father, Zhang Wenjie, and many emperor-level cultivators. The seven of them stood in the void like a divine army. The terrifying blade will of the great path suppressed the boundless space. The moment they landed, it was as if they had become the absolute masters of the northern border. So powerful. Xiao Yi felt the power of the Imperial Lord up close for the first time. 2 words, terrifying. 3 words, terrifying. 4 words, unreachable. They are. Under the demon armor, Duan Zhanfei's body was faintly trembling. He pointed to the group of cultivators of the Zhan clan and asked Qin Hao, "Oh, my brother's elders." Qin Hao smiled and answered casually, "My father and my grand-elder are here." Zhan Yi explained to Duan Zhanfei. It was also an introduction. It was not convenient to talk about their relationship with Qin Hao. They were generals under the direct command of Dendi and under the command of Zhang Lang, one of the 4 major armies. Does this mean that they are allies? Yilan Yuan looked at Xiao Yi and broke out in cold sweat. His brother's elders were also Qin Hao's elders. "Everyone, please step back." Zhang Wenjie stepped back. All the elders of the Zhan clan also stepped back, leaving only Zhan Zhu in front. After all, at the Tao proving the arch level, even emperors were not qualified to interfere. If they were careless, they would be annihilated. Thinking of Xinyuan Gaoyan's battle, Sword the Arch, Luo the Arch, Ming the Arch, and the others also silently circulated their Imperial Lord Earth energies and stepped back. The destructive power of the Imperial Lord level was too strong. Although Yin Zhu and Fu Di's Tao proving aura had not reached perfection, they had both reached the peak of the 8th level. Zhan He would not hold back and would definitely use all his strength. Understood. Xiao Yi nodded and retreated with Duan Zhanfei and Yilan Yuan to where Xiaogua was. They also knew that the next battle would definitely be an earth-shattering one. With their cultivation, they were not qualified to watch it at such a close distance. Everyone stepped back, including Qin Hao and the others. Then, the space became quiet again. Emperor Fu, Ancestor Yin, and Ancestor Zhan stared at each other with sharp eyes. Even though they were standing there quietly, the Emperor intent in their bodies was surging violently. "Do you really want to interfere?" Fu Di asked. He naturally knew that the other party was on Qin Hao's side. 8 levels of the Dao Proving Realm. There's still 1 level left. The old man is here to prove your Dao. Johnny said calmly, "You're shameless." Yin Zhu roared like a lion king. His old palm struck forward, and the emperor intent formed a terrifying lion head and swooped forward. Chapter 16:22. Zhang Guang, he stood there, his body surrounded by platinum blade intent. A blazing white arc of light flew out from his body and slashed forward, cutting through the lion's head and landing on Yinzu's head. The palace lord reached out his hand, and sharp imperial qi flowed along his arm to his palm. A platinum commander seal appeared in his hand. The commander seal flew up and hovered in the air, blotting out the startling imperial light. Tens of thousands of murderous air currents shot forward like thousands of weapons at Zhang Guang He, covering the sky and the sun. Bang! Zhang Guang, he stomped his foot, and the emperor's will radiated out. The void shook, and his will seemed to control the space. Saber will was everywhere. His emperor body rumbled, and dazzling saber light burst out. A huge crescent saber chi swept forward, annihilating all the killing currents. It charged forward and cut the commander's seal in half. In an instant, the sky above Yin Gui's city exploded into a fierce battle. Endless saber chi raged, and the talismans and emperor's light crisscrossed. In addition, there were the thunderous roars of the Lion King. The more Zhang Guang He and the other two fought, the more violent they became. They kept moving higher and higher into the sky. Obviously, they were deliberately trying to avoid harming the people in the city. Spatial cracks were torn open by the Emperor Qi, like countless tentacles stretching out. The rumbling was like rolling thunder. The entire void of northern Yin was like doomsday. The scene was extremely terrifying. Zhang Guang He's 9th tier Dao, proving perfection, brought great pressure to Yin Zhu and Palace Emperor. Although the two of them worked together to fight, they were still suppressed. From the beginning of the battle to the continuous increase in combat strength, they were still suppressed by this peerless saber master. From afar, Xiao Yi and the others were watching the battle intently. It was as if their spirit and emperor will had been integrated into the battle. Their moods would change according to the changes in the moves used to slay Guang He. Every time Yin Zhu and Fu Di increased their emperor will by 1 level, everyone would be a little more nervous. It was as if they were fighting against 2 grandmaster-level cultivators themselves. It was rare to see a fight of this level in one's life. To Xiao Yi, Duan Zhanfei, and Yilong Yuan, it was an extremely precious wealth of experience. They were lucky to learn a thing or two from the fight, which would help them deepen their understanding of the Emperor's way. Seeing the serious expressions of the seniors, as if they wanted to imprint every movement of the 3 in the way of the Emperor's will into their minds, Qin Hao smiled. In the end, they were still at a lower level. They had never seen a major character like the Sovereign Master before. On the other hand, Xiaogua and the others seemed to be very calm. This group of young people were talking and laughing, and they even commented on the battle. They'd even seen the Divine Palace's great Emperor Nirvana, and they'd personally experienced the annihilation of the top powers of the Southern Territory, so they naturally wouldn't be surprised by this small scene before them. Although the old man from the Northern Yin and the black-robed old man have both reached the pinnacle of 8th level Emperor intent, they still haven't proven their Dao in the end. Defeat is only a matter of time. Qin Hao said to himself as he watched the battle. Fortunately, the 2 old men hadn't proven their Dao. Otherwise, even if he killed Guang He alone, he wouldn't be able to deal with them. He'd have to ask his senior sister to do it. However, unless it was absolutely necessary, Qin Hao didn't want to disturb Muri's meditation. That would go against the principles of the Divine Palace, and he didn't want to twist his senior sister's will. Roar! The battle became more and more intense. As time passed, the 3 had been fighting for a quarter of an hour. No one knew how much dilly they'd consumed. Finally, Yin Zhu couldn't bear the pressure of the Emperor's will and released the Murong family's will of the Lion King. The Emperor's spirit appeared behind him, and directly entered his body. Just like Emperor Yin, he transformed into a giant golden lion. In the void, there were dense lion shadows, worshipping the giant golden lion. Waves of lion will continue to merge into Yin Zhu's body, strengthening his will of the way. But the difference was that there were 9 golden heads on the Yin ancestor's giant lion martial body, one more than the Yin emperor. Obviously, the Murong family's ancestor's bloodline was more noble. From this, one could see how important Murong Zijuan was in the northern Yin. He had inherited the perfect bloodline of his family. How could the Yin emperor not feel the pain of his death? Buzz. Endless Emperor's light rolled, and the murderous intent was fierce. Under the feet of Fu Di, there was a golden emperor's wheel. The wheel spun like a wheel of the great path, and golden commander seals kept pouring out of it. There were all kinds of soldiers' wills, and they all surrounded his emperor's body. It was as if there were all kinds of weapons under his control. This person is very strong. It's very likely that he'll reach that step. Don't hold back. Yin Zhu shouted. He was almost sure that he was the Emperor Realm cultivator they yearned for. Go! Fu Di waved his hand. On his emperor's body, endless commander's seals rushed forward. The commander's seals were inlaid, interlocking with each other. It was as if they had formed a thick golden wall. On the wall, endless chi of soldiers' chi shot out. Sword chi, blade light, halberds, heavy hammers. It included all kinds of weapons in the world. His primordial spirit was a weapon wheel, and it could produce the chi of all weapons. Without Yin Zhu's words, he had to use all his cultivation. 9 heavens, 10 slashes. He said in a domineering voice. He raised his old hand above his head. Above his hand, Emperor's light gushed out. His spiritual soul resonated with the great path. His entire body disappeared and condensed into a beam of blade light. At that moment, heaven and earth shook violently. Endless blade will spread out. The void cracked, and blade marks appeared on the ground. Countless buildings on the ground shook violently as if they were being cut by the blade wheel. Outside the city, the mountains and rivers exploded into waves. Yin Zhu and Fu Di had used all their strength, so he naturally did the same. His aura was even stronger. As an Emperor Realm cultivator, his anger could shatter mountains and rivers. Buzz! The blade light split into 10 beams, and the 10 beams merged into one slash. It was the ultimate blade slash. As He's arm slashed downwards, his entire body disappeared and merged with the blade light. It was as if his Emperor Realm body had also merged with the profound meaning of the blade slash. The terrifying blade light pressed down from the 9 heavens. The sky was shattering. Yin Zhu's scream was heard. As the blade light fell, the weapon chi in the sky disappeared. The Dao wall formed by the commander seal was also forcefully cut in half. Fu Di had the power of 10,000 weapons, but it was broken by a single slash. Then, 10 blade slashes fell towards the 2 at the same time. Swoosh! Blood rained down from the sky. In front of everyone's eyes, the heads of the golden lions were continuously thrown into the air. They were destroyed by the blade chi. Yin Zhu was immediately severely injured. He sadly realized that the strongest bloodline power of the Murong clan, which was the pride of the Murong clan, could not withstand a single attack from his opponent. He was reduced to the same state as Emperor Yin. He spat out a large mouthful of blood. A wisp of blade chi tore open the body of the golden lion. The blade light slashed through the middle. The moment his martial body was broken, Yin Zhu frantically retreated. His physical body narrowly escaped the fate of being cut in half. Even so, he was invaded by the rules of blade, will of sovereign master. His spiritual soul was immediately injured. The moment he revealed his true form, a terrifying blade slash appeared on his chest. His flesh curled outwards and spread across his entire chest. However, Fu Di was also trapped. As the blade might gradually dissipated, he did not suffer the same fate as Yin Zhu. He was not severely injured by He. Even though Fu Di's hair was messy, his emperor chi fluctuated violently, and his black robe had countless cuts. Half of his body was bleeding, but the light of his emperor body was still there. 9 planes of proving the way. So you become a sovereign master. Guanghe's blade, will of the great path of sword, retracted into his body. He quickly took 2 breaths and looked at Fu Di in surprise. Fu Di's dissatisfaction with his Tao, proving the way, was actually an act. Your blade slash is really arrogant. Unfortunately, it's still not enough to take down the old man. Fu Di hovered in the air and showed Guanghe a little finger. He meant that if Guanghe's blade chi had been just a little bit stronger, he might have lost his life. Unfortunately, he was just a little bit away. Fu Di, you really? Yanzu pressed his palm against his cracked chest. The blade slash had almost cut through him. He was in so much pain that he grimaced. However, he was more surprised by Fu Di's cultivation. Fu Di was a sovereign master. Get lost. This is none of your business. Fu Di did not even look at Yanzu and said bluntly. Now, Yanzu was already holding him back and was not qualified to stand side by side with him. You? Yanzu's face was filled with anger. He smiled sadly, but he obediently retreated to the side. Even though he was very unhappy, he also understood that he and Fu Di were no longer equal. Moreover, he was so severely injured that he did not have the strength to continue fighting. Zhang he stared at Fu Di. Although there was a thin line between the limit of the 8th stage and the 9th stage, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. Since he was in Sovereign Master, he had the absolute right to kill sovereigns. His current opponent was enough to make him pay attention. Kid, let me borrow your halberd. Zhang his voice rumbled behind him. Clearly, he was talking to Qinyan. The only weapon qualified to be in his hands was the Divine Soldier and Sovereign Master. Although you have perfected your Tao, your aura is still a little weak. It hasn't been long since you stepped through the threshold, right? That's why your Tao intent and cultivation are not completely compatible. Dazzling halberd flew over from behind. Qinyan threw it over without hesitation. Zhang his hand reached out slightly and caught it in his palm. The moment the supreme emperor weapon was in his hand, the majestic power of the great Tao spread throughout his sovereign body. His aura was clearly strengthened. Moreover, he knew that Fu Di had just stepped into the sovereign master level and was not used to the fusion of his sovereign body and perfected Tao intent. He could not unleash the true cultivation of a sovereign master. Therefore, this guy was very unlucky. So what? Fu Di said with a trembling voice. His emperor will bloom again. The power of the perfected Tao formed a divine wheel of the great Tao that spun under his feet. Boundless brilliance surrounded his sovereign body, making him look extremely majestic. Since he had stepped through the door, he had become a sovereign master. His aura had indeed strengthened a lot and was more perfected. His every move could trigger the momentum of heaven and earth. So this is your sorrow. Zhang he moved. He held the Xinyuan halberd as if he was holding a blade. Using the halberd as a blade, the sovereign will of the Tao was integrated into it. An extremely terrifying arc of light slashed out. At this moment, the halberd erupted with unparalleled power. The imperial wheel under Fu Di's feet spun wildly. Talismans flew out quickly, condensing into tangible weapons. The weapons flew forward and filled the sky. Sorrow? He wanted to see who in this world could make him feel sorrow. He was in Sovereign Master. The two continued to fight. Their aura and will of the Emperor were both enhanced. Zhang he used the halberd as a blade. His moves were bold and domineering. Every move contained the power to split mountains. It was extremely arrogant and domineering. Faintly, his style was not inferior to Xinyuan Gaoyan of the southern region. Fu Di was also quite powerful. The offensive power of his imperial wheel was very strong. He was born to be the type that was extremely difficult to deal with. When he fully unleashed his cultivation, although he was still suppressed by Zhang he with the supreme imperial weapon, it would not be easy to take him down in a short time. If he wanted to leave, he was confident that no one could stop him. Therefore, He had no fear in his heart. Yin Zhu was shocked. These two people's cultivation was far above his. As the great ancestor of Northern Yin, he had no ability to intervene. How sad was that? At present, he could only hope that Fu Di could stall them. It would be best if both sides were injured. Otherwise, he would end up in a miserable state. Turning his gaze, Yin Zhu looked at Qin Hao's group with a ferocious glint in his eyes. Since the emperor had successfully stalled them, he could go and settle the score with Qin Hao and Xiao Yi without any scruples. At this moment, he regained the pride of the great ancestor of Northern Yin. Chapter 1623. No matter how strong Zhang Guang he was only one person. If the Fu Di could hold him back, Yin Zhu would not miss the chance to capture him. He endured his injuries and roared. The will of the emperor swept out and filled the air with endless murderous intent. Not good. He was fascinated by the scene. Only then did he realize that the old man from the Murong clan was about to attack them. Qin Hao noticed it too. However, he was calm as usual. At this moment, he seemed to have sensed something. He closed his eyes and muttered to himself, "He's here." The unblemished emperor spirit was majestic and vast. It extended into the boundless void. A wave of power was rapidly approaching. It was clearly transmitted into Qin Hao's consciousness. He knew that it was the person he was waiting for. "I know that the old man is about to attack. You guys hide. Shuian, what are you waiting for?" Yi Longyuan said anxiously. He clearly misunderstood Qin Hao's meaning. The old man from a Northern Yin clan was very powerful. Even if he was severely injured, he was not someone they could stop. Even with the help of the Zhan family, they would not be able to stop him. This place was too dangerous. Yi Longyuan was anxious. It was too late to escape. They had to fight to the death. However, if they lost, the children would be in their prime. It was too painful. Crack! An extremely terrifying sound rang out as a crack was torn open in the sky. A mass of dazzling, majestic emperor light descended. Within the emperor light, there was an incomparably powerful aura of the great emperor. It raged out and interrupted Yi Longyuan's thoughts. Everyone raised their heads and looked over, their hearts trembling violently. This monarch light was too strong, stronger than Yin Zhu and Fu Di. It was even stronger than Zhang Guanghe. Everyone present was shocked and wondered which monarch had arrived. East Continent's great Zhou dynasty's patriarch, Zhou Wendi. A proud shout reverberated between heaven and earth. The voice was very familiar. It was Zhou Wudao. He had arrived. As Qin Hao had wished, Zhou Wudao had brought along the founding ancestor of the Zhou clan, one of the supreme emperors of the East Continent. Emperor Wen of Zhou of the great Zhou dynasty. He was known as the Emperor of True Self, a master of the second realm of Emperor Dao. Zhou Wendi appeared. At this time, the will of the True Self Emperor bloomed with a whistling sound. The terrifying aura suppressed the universe. Even someone as strong as Guang, he was deeply suppressed. However, the battle between Zhang Guanghe and Fu Di did not stop. Because they could not stop. The heavens are really helping me. Xiao Yi, your end has come. My dear friend from the Zhou clan, quickly lend the old man a hand and kill that rude old mad dog. Yin Zhu pointed at Guang He and cursed angrily. His heart was overjoyed. Originally, in this battle, he had hoped to capture Qin Hao and Xiao Yi. However, the appearance of Zhang Guang, he made him understand that not only would he not be able to capture them, he might even lose his life in the hands of the other party. How sad was that? However, he had been saved from death's door. The pleasant surprise came too suddenly, and there was a glimmer of hope. "All right, I'll lend you a hand." As he said, a stroke was a stroke. As a majestic shout spread out, the will of the true self great path flowed in the emperor's light. A boundless, giant Qinxiu divine brush appeared, hanging at the top of the sky. With a stroke, a terrifying emperor's light descended. However, this emperor's light whistled and slashed toward Yin Zhu. It was extremely cold and sharp. Immediately, Everyone in the void was dumbfounded. Pairs of eyes looked at this scene with incomparable shock. Even Yin Zhu himself was stunned. Then, a terrifying death chi pressed down. The Emperor's will of the true self-great path was terrifying. Even though he had never come into contact with this level, Yin Zhu knew that it had surpassed Zhangguang, his Emperor's path. He let out an incomparably shrill scream. At the moment of life and death, he used all his strength to block. The will of the Lion King and his family's bloodline erupted again. The great path martial body of the Lion King tried to block the falling Emperor's light. Pucci, the boundless true self Dilly arrived and cut into the golden lion's body without any obstruction. The 9 lion heads flew together. The scene was spectacular. Yin Zhu's original body didn't even have the chance to escape. The Emperor's light of the Qinxiu divine brush followed Zhangguang. His blade wound and directly cut Yin Zhu in half. The two halves fell down at the same time. Xiao, Yi, and the others were so shocked that they didn't dare to breathe. What kind of power did this brush contain? It was like killing an ant. The Northern Yin ancestor had reached the limit of the 8th tier of the Wei. He was almost comparable to a Dao sovereign lord. Zhangguang, his full strength wasn't enough to kill him directly. However, this casual stroke actually cut him in half. Incomparable shock and awe. Perhaps Dilly was split quite a bit when Zhangguang was fighting 1 against 2. However, one could still see how powerful the owner of this stroke was. Ah! The Northern Yin ancestor's scream spread throughout the entire Yangui city. Even though his emperor's body was cut in half, he didn't die. At this moment, his divine soul was attached to the upper half of his body. Surging with the remaining Dilly, he turned into a ray of light and fled into the distance. It was too terrifying. He didn't have any time to think. No matter what Zhou Wendy's motive was, he only knew that if he didn't escape quickly, he would definitely die here. While Prefecture Emperor was still able to hold on, Zhou Wendy might be attracted by Prefecture Emperor in the next second. Now was his only chance to escape. As for the Northern Yin Empire, Emperor Yin, and the entire Morong family, he was already powerless. His emperor's body was cut in half, and he had already done his duty. Anyway, his children and grandchildren had their own blessings, and it had nothing to do with him. Ancestor, looking at the fleeing Emperor Wang, Emperor Yin was heartbroken. Tears flowed down his face. The ancestor actually fled. That was the family's backer, the pillar of Northern Yin. Had the ancestor ever thought that the family's children and grandchildren would end up in such a miserable state? At this moment, Emperor Yin was heartbroken as if he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. His vitality is quite tenacious. Zhou Wendy snorted coldly. He had underestimated the lion of Northern Borderline. An ordinary 8th level Yuan Emperor would have died long ago after receiving such a blow. It seemed that the bloodline power of a family that could stand at the top of the main region was not to be underestimated. However, it wasn't a big problem. He could just use another brush. The true self-emperor intent roared and surged, merging with the great Tao of the heavens. Zhou Wendy's divine soul power covered the vast void at an incredible speed and caught up with Yin Zhu in the blink of an eye. He was about to finish him off with another blow. Suddenly, Zhou Wendy frowned slightly, and the Qinxiu brush hanging in the sky disappeared. It's him. A familiar aura descended, giving Zhou Wendy a slight pressure. He guessed the other party's identity. If there was a great emperor in Northern Borderline who was qualified to make him wary, there was only one. Whoosh! A gust of medicinal wind blew in his face. It seemed to come from an extremely far place, but it also seemed to be very close at the same time. At this moment, Qin Hao, Xiao Yi, and the others all smelled a rich medicinal fragrance that nourished their hearts and refreshed their minds. It was as if their divine souls were swimming in the great Tao of the 9 heavens. It was incomparably comfortable. Boom! A heavy palm sound blasted into everyone's ears. All the emperors, including Zhang Wenjie, felt as if they were struck by lightning. The blood and qi in their bodies surged violently. They saw Yin Zhu, who had escaped, flying back at a speed several times faster than before. To be precise, he was forcibly blocked and sent flying back. Blood spurted out unscrupulously as if he was about to vomit out his internal organs. On the remaining half of Yanzu's body, the imperial light was completely shattered. A bloody hole was punched through his forehead, revealing an extremely shocking palm print. Old Monster Jiang. Yanzu's eyes were bloodshot as he looked at the peerless figure in front of him. Chapter 1624. This figure was wearing a simple green robe. His aura was merged with the Great Path, and a layer of medicinal light flashed around him. It was the Medicine Royal Pavilion's ancestral patriarch, Divine Emperor Jiang. Divine Emperor Jiang had been famous for a long time and was ranked Dendi. However, because East Continent's Denda's reputation and cultivation were too strong, he was ranked below Qin Hao. Ancestral Patriarch, you're out. When Pavilion Master Jiang saw this, his eyes lit up with joy. He dragged his bloodied body over and knelt in the air in front of Saint Emperor Jiang. At this moment, Pavilion Master Jiang couldn't help but cry as if he had been wronged. He hugged Saint Emperor Jiang's leg and wailed. Divine Emperor Jiang looked down at Pavilion Master Jiang and saw that his clothes were tattered. A layer of skin seemed to have fallen off his body. However, Divine Emperor Jiang knew that no one had hurt Pavilion Master Jiang. He had accidentally gotten involved in the aftermath. Slap! A resounding slap landed on Pavilion Master Jiang's face. Ignoring the shock and confusion in his eyes, Saint Emperor Jiang stepped into the air and slowly walked towards Qin Hao. Faintly, one could see the unconcealable excitement and a trace of sadness in his eyes. After 600 years, he had finally returned. However, the East Continent's emperor who had once shocked the 4 regions and 8 barren lands had lost his cultivation and become a young man. It's about to end. Another ray of emperor light flashed and appeared beside Emperor Qi and Qi Yuan. Ancestral Patriarch, you're out too. Emperor Qi was shocked. He quickly stepped down from his precious throne and pulled Qi Yuan to kneel before Ancestor Qi like a devout believer. Ancestor Qi smiled faintly and didn't answer. How could he not come out after such a big commotion in Beijiang? In fact, he and Divine Emperor Jiang had already come out half a year ago and went to northern Liao at the same time. They saw Xiao Yi and Qin Hao's imperial seal. If it weren't for Denda's imperial seal, northern Liao would have ceased to exist and the world wouldn't have seen this battle. Die! Guanghe's roar could be heard from the void. The battle had reached its limit, and both he and the Mansion Emperor were in a stalemate of life and death. Victory and defeat could be decided in one move. At this moment, the Dao verification saber will raged in the void, forming a terrifying saber will storm. Zhang Guanghe stood in the center of the storm, his entire being turned into a blazing saber light that merged into the Xian Yuan halberd. The Dao verification saber was raised to the limit. The storm was like a divine dragon that coiled around the Xian Yuan halberd and rushed towards the Palace Monarch. Palace Monarch's face was pale, and he was panting heavily. Although he had managed to hold on until now, it was obvious that he was running out of energy. He had yet to fully control his Emperor's will of the 9th level. Just as Zhang Guan had said, he was still no match for Yi Futian. Moreover, seeing that the other party was getting stronger and stronger, and had even used the Blade of Death, Fu Di's body was drained of energy, and his aura immediately weakened. He made up his mind that this was impossible, so he turned around and fled into the distance, unable to tear open space and time. However, in his desperation, he neglected one point. Zhang Guang, he wasn't the only emperor present. There were also Zhou Wendi of the Great Zhou Empire and Holy Emperor Jiang of the Medicine Emperor Pavilion. The latter two were even stronger than Zhang Guanghe. Whoosh! The Qinqiu brush's radiance slashed down, and at the same time, a great Dao medicinal light sealed off the void, like a cage imprisoning the entire world. Fu Di felt as if he had crashed into a wall. With a bang, he suffered a powerful backlash and was forced to retreat, right in the direction where Emperor Xuanyuan's halberd and Qinqiu brush's radiance had landed. No! Amidst his roar, Fu Di was like a wild beast trapped in a cage, filled with panic and fear. He even forgot to struggle as he watched the halberd and brush radiance reflected in his eyes. At this moment, he recalled many memories of his life. He established the Zhanyue sect. Although he started late, his sect grew stronger step by step until it became the dominant force in the northern frontier. Even the Murong clan couldn't suppress it, and the clan's authority was equal to the imperial authority. However, he wasn't satisfied with this and continued to cultivate in seclusion. He believed that sooner or later, he would ascend to the position of emperor. When that time came, he would be the ruler of the entire northern frontier, and his status would be comparable to Dindi of the East Continent. He also wanted to enjoy the feeling of being respected by the heavens and earth. Now he had succeeded. He had reached the 9th level of the Great Circle of the Way and had become an emperor. But why did he not receive the cheers of the people of the northern frontier? Nor did he receive the fear of the major forces of the northern frontier? On the contrary, he lost his life here. On the day he released his emperor's will, he also welcomed the end of his life. As expected, proving the way was tragic. The halberd and brush radiance passed through Fu Di's body at the same time. The terrifying rules of proving the way wreaked havoc, and an even stronger will of true self destroyed everything, including Fu Di's spiritual soul. When the blade radiance dissipated, the brush radiance flew back into Zhou Wendy's hand, and Fu Di's figure disappeared from the world. You should go as well. Holy Emperor Jiang looked at Yin Zhu. Without waiting for an answer, a medicinal light fell and enveloped Yin Zhu. He didn't even have the chance to beg for mercy before his spiritual soul dissipated along with the medicinal light. Great ancestor, why? In the vast void, Yin Zhu stood alone, crying and laughing at the same time. Seeing two great ancestors killed with his own eyes, he was on the verge of a mental breakdown. Even though the Murong clan's palace was still there, still dignified and majestic, none of the thousands of clansmen in the palace dared to step forward, and no one could help him. It wasn't that they didn't want to, but that they didn't have the right. However, he was the one who supported the Murong clan. Qin Hao looked at Yin Zhu and slowly stepped forward. He said, "Today's disaster is all your own fault." "Our own fault? You killed my son. Am I wrong?" Yin Zhu raised his head and roared. Qin Hao stopped moving and looked down. He saw that there were countless Murong clan members gathered in the vast palace. All of them were so frightened that they were trembling. There were also some who clenched their fists tightly, and their eyes were filled with rage, but they did not dare to say anything. At this moment, Qin Hao thought of many things. Not too long ago, when he died in the God Burial Valley, the family members of his 4 divine generals must have suffered the same calamity as well. Struggle, pain, hatred, fear, and helplessness. It was just like the moment when Beio Xinyuan died. Was Yin Zhu wrong? No, he wasn't. Of course, Qin Hao wasn't wrong either. On Yunming Mountain, could he not fight back when Murong Zijuan wanted to kill him? If he hadn't come today, what would have happened to Xiao Yi? It would have been worse. The grudges in the world were like this. There was no need to explain. Let's settle this between us. Don't worry, I won't vent my anger on your family. Xiao Yi stepped forward and walked past Qin Hao. He faced Yin Zhu, surrounded by Emperor Qi. The northern Yin had always coveted the Xiao clan's territory. Especially after the internal strife in northern Liao, the Xiao clan's strength had declined sharply. The Yin emperor had been thinking about annexing the Xiao clan's territory and even tempted the Qi emperor to join in. Xiao Yi knew all of this. Even if Qin Hao wasn't his son-in-law and didn't kill Murong Zijuan, northern Liao and northern Yin would still have battle. Qin Hao's appearance had only brought this battle forward. Qi Ziqing turned his head and looked over. His face trembled. He was a refiner of the inferior artifact. The ancestors of the Qi clan were obsessed with forging artifacts. In reality, he had no intention of taking over the foundation of the Xiao clan. However, Emperor Yin had repeatedly tempted him. Gradually, he began to have thoughts of taking over the foundation of the Xiao clan. If Qi Yuan hadn't come back early, Qi Emperor's shadow might have really appeared in the Great Northern Alliance. Fortunately, He didn't participate. He was glad that he didn't. Bring out your full strength and fight like a man. Since you're the emperor of Northern Yin, you should have a majesty of an emperor. Even if you die, you must die with dignity. Xiao, he took a step forward and black light surged around him. His demonic energy surged and his eyes pierced into Emperor Yan's eyes like a fiend god. Chapter 1625. Emperor Yan's soul shook. Even if he was going to die, he had to die with dignity. His will of the way bloomed, and the blood in his body roared. The roar of the Lion King lingered in the air. He looked at Xiao Yi and sighed. If we could do it all over again without the accident with Zi Jun, we might have been able to become friends. Dong. Xiao Yi took a heavy step forward. His eyes flashed with demonic light. A terrifying will of the emperor swept forward. His demon-like body rushed towards the Yin emperor, and he shouted, "You and I can never be friends." The Xiao clan had been in chaos for 10 years. As the crown prince, he was forced to leave his home. If the Murong clan didn't cause trouble behind the scenes, he didn't believe it. He would never be friends with Emperor Yin. Northern Liao and Northern Yin would fight eventually. It had nothing to do with Qin Hao or Murong Zijuan. They were fated enemies. The powerful demonic emperor will press down. Emperor Yin smiled. Seeing Xiao Yi's eyes, he knew that some things couldn't be hidden from Xiao Wudi's eyes. That's right. The Xiao clan was in chaos. Among the experts who tried to kill Xiao Yi, there were indeed people from the Murong clan. Xiao Yi's death was naturally beneficial to Northern Yin. They would never become friends. Roar! Lion King will raged, and a huge Lion King battle form appeared above Emperor Yan's body. The lion roared, and Emperor Will and Rules gathered in his fists. He punched forward with the force of mountains. This was his last battle. Even if he died at the hands of Xiao Yi, it would be the best ending. At least his death wouldn't affect his clansmen. Qin Hao looked at the two. Xiao Yi's demonic power was unparalleled. He had reached the 4th Emperor realm. On the other hand, Emperor Yin was only at the 3rd Emperor realm. He had been severely injured. There was no doubt about the result of this battle. Swoosh! Just as the two Emperor Wills were about to collide, a beam of 7-colored light suddenly descended from behind. It was dazzling, like a skylark swooping down, letting out a loud cry. Its speed was so fast that one could not even blink. It pierced through Xiao Yi's back with an extremely sharp radiance, piercing into the Lion King martial body and directly through Emperor Yan's chest. Then, the 7-colored light dissipated. A woman stood in the air behind Emperor Yan. She was dignified, and noble. You? Emperor Yin slowly turned his head and looked at the woman. At this moment, the Lion King's Dharma body had been pierced through, and his Emperor Qi was frantically leaking out into the world. You killed a descendant of my Skylark sect. A debt of blood must be paid with blood, the woman said coldly. She didn't even look at Emperor Yin. Bang! As soon as the woman's voice fell, the gigantic lion figure exploded in the void. Emperor Yin was drowned in the turbulence, and the will of the emperor dissipated along with him. This woman was the leader of the Skylark clan, Sparrow Mother. Sparrow Mother! Shout! He exclaimed. Mother! Aunt Fu! 2 flowing lights flew over. Transformed into a human and arrived in front of Sparrow Mother with Xiao Han. The 2 women were overjoyed as they hugged Sparrow Mother's arms from both sides. Sparrow Mother still had a great deal of resentment in her heart, but the moment she saw Xiao Han and the resentment in her eyes gradually receded and was replaced by a warm current. Mother, why are you here too? Kair asked. She tilted her head and looked at her mother. As the leader of the Old Ones in the northern borderline, she rarely went out and hated human cities even more. The goddamn Murong clan killed your cousin and took the divine tree that their family lived in. Sparrow Mother gritted her teeth and looked at the northern Yin royal palace. The emperor will seep into it directly, and she found what she was looking for with a single thought. She raised her snow lotus-like arm, and suddenly a lush divine tree climbed out of the sky and pierced through one of the palaces. It turned into a ray of light and disappeared into her palm, stored in her storage ring. For this divine tree, the human emperor of the Murong clan besieged and killed one of her nephews when she wasn't paying attention, and took it away by force. If she wasn't afraid of the great grandmaster of the northern Yin and the emperor of Yin, she would have destroyed Yingui's city to vent her anger. But she knew that she couldn't win, and it wouldn't help even if she had Xiao, Yi, and Duan Zhanfei with her. All she could do was hold it in until now. If Qin Hao hadn't come and killed the great grandmaster of Yin, she wouldn't have had a chance to attack. She took advantage of the emperor of Yan's attention to Xiao Yi to kill him directly. A severely wounded person couldn't stop her. "How dare you? How dare you? I'll kill everyone here." "Hey," her yelled while stomping her feet in the void. Her cousin used to love her so much, but he died under the butcher's knife. Cough, cough. Qin Hao walked over, raised his hand, and put it on K.O.'s head to comfort her. He felt K.O.'s sharp eyes on him, so he quickly withdrew his hand and bowed slightly. Junior Qin Hao greets Senior. K.O. glanced at Qin Hao and felt his aura. Dilly was reserved, vigorous, and deep. He had defeated the abbot of Tiangang Temple. If they really fought, she wouldn't be his opponent. Facing Xiao Yi, K.O. said, "Your son-in-law is not bad." Xiao Yi laughed. Of course, he was not bad. His son-in-law was extremely powerful today. Gu Fu, the emperor of Yin, and the old man of the Murong clan are dead. You can't blame everyone. I'm not that narrow-minded. K interrupted. Her real name was Gu Fu. "Senior, please forgive me," Qin Hao said. "An emperor should have the magnanimity of an emperor. As for the rest, you can do as you see fit." Han, come back to Liaodu with me. Took a deep breath. Could she really let go of this resentment? How could it be so easy? The Skylar clan was already few in number, and the Murong clan was extremely cruel. If Xiao Yi hadn't said that he would spare the Murong clan's younger generation, she would have died. This matter, was definitely not over yet. However, she had to give Xiao Yi some face. "She's a bit forceful," Qin Hao said softly and secretly glanced at Kay. "Back then, when Zhanfei and I teamed up, we didn't gain any advantage in front of her. It was Kay who took the initiative to get close to me. That's why she agreed to let Kay meet Xiao Han." Xiao Yi said softly. "She's an orphan and a widow. Why would Kay take the initiative to get close to you? Is there something between you and Kay Qin Hao felt that there was more to it. "Get lost." Xiao Yi waved his hand and walked away. "Father-in-law, Kay is really good. Think about it." Qin Hao turned back and shouted. One lost his wife, and the other didn't have a husband. They were a match made in heaven. Kay probably lacked fatherly love and got close to him out of curiosity. Xiao Yi staggered and almost fell. He turned back and glared at Qin Hao. "I think I have to reconsider your marriage with Han. Don't, I was wrong." Qin Hao quickly admitted defeat. It wasn't easy for him to escape from the Celestial Palace. This time, he came back mainly to hold the wedding. Xiao Yi raised his head and returned to Duan Zhanfei and Yi Longyuan with the posture of a victor. "You still want to fight with me? Be careful. Big brother's position in the family is worrying in the future." Xiaoguo poked Yi Shuihan. "What are you worrying about?" Yi Shuihan said. His thoughts flew to the 9 heavens. An Aransu smile appeared in his mind. Now that he had become a Yuan Arch, should he go to Nalinzhenggang to propose marriage? He shouldn't be rejected, right? Today's trip is only to resolve personal matters. I won't use force to reverse anything in the northern borderline. The Yin Emperor is dead, and the grudge between me and the Murong clan is written off. But there is one thing. If you still dare to covet Daliao, you won't give up. In the next battle, Yingui's city will completely disappear from the world. Qin Hao stood in the void and shouted toward the northern Yin imperial city. His emperor's aura was impressive, and his tone was like the sound of an alarm bell, making people not dare to raise their heads. At this moment, the city was dead silent. The vast number of northern Yin martial artists, and even the people of the Murong clan, no one dared to make sound. Many old people sighed. The Yin emperor, and Yin ancestor were dead, and the Murong clan had lost their emperor. An internal battle was inevitable, just like the Shao clan 15 years ago. The princes led their troops to attack each other, and the dukes established themselves as kings. The empire fell apart. But all of this had nothing to do with Northern Liao. Shao, he was already considered benevolent. This aura, you are. At this moment, Zhou Wendi, the ancestor of the great Zhou dynasty, suddenly turned pale. His voice trembled as he pointed at Qin Hao, as if he had discovered something extremely terrifying. All kinds of scenes of the past were like huge waves, constantly bombarding his divine soul. The scenes of the past buried in the bottom of his heart seduced his terrifying memories, and he faintly retreated. Qin Hao turned his head and looked at Zhou Wendi. There was a hint of a sneer at the corner of his mouth, as if he was looking at him with contempt. That arrogant face and immeasurable eyes were like the old dandy. He deliberately released the Emperor's spirit just now to attract Zhou Wendi's attention. Sure enough, the other party recognized him. Bang! Zhou Wendi's heart violently trembled, especially when Qin Hao smiled at him. That formless aura was like an arrow of the setting sun, heavily piercing into his soul, extinguishing all of his arrogance. A voice from the depths of his soul seemed to be telling him to run, to use all of his strength to run. Zhou Wendi stared at Zhou Wudao. The smile on Zhou Wudao's face was like a terrifying, killing intent that seeped into his soul, almost driving him insane. He lifted his hand and slapped Zhou Wudao's face, causing a resounding slap to resound through the air. Come, old ancestor, let me introduce you. Zhou Wendi stared at Zhou Wudao. Zhou Wudao's smile was like a terrifying, killing intent that permeated his soul, almost driving him insane. He lifted his hand and slapped Zhou Wudao. Do you know who he is? Zhou Wendi's expression became ferocious, and his facial features were completely twisted together. He only knew that Zhou Wudao had dragged him to the northern borderline and said that he would destroy the Murong family of Northern Yan. Because of the blood of the great Zhou dynasty's royal family, they had made a heavenly pact with the Murong family. How could Zhou Wendi accept this? The heavenly pact was the supreme and cruel covenant of the heavenly way. A single mistake would implicate the entire family. Who was Zhou Wendi? He was one of the supreme emperors of the East Continent, a second-stage emperor, the great emperor of true self. How could he tie his fate to Northern Yan? When he heard about this, and Zhou Wudao even told him that there was a way to break the heavenly pact without being punished by the heavenly way, he did not say anything and crossed over from the East Continent. He did not stop along the way. He only knew that it was enough to kill Yan Zhu. But Zhou Wudao did not tell him that there was a mortal enemy here who would scare him awake from his nightmares. Zhou Wudao was stunned. Everyone was stunned by this slap. Shao and the rest could not react at all. Could it be that this ancestor of the great Zhou dynasty, the supreme emperor of the East Continent, was not here to help Qin Hao? Zhou Wudao covered his face with one hand and stood there in a daze for a long time. He looked at the ancestor and then at Qin Hao. The ancestor asked, "Do you know who that white-haired youth is?" Of course he knew. It was Qin Hao, and Zhou Wudao said it directly. He introduced him to Zhou Wudi with great sincerity. "Qin Hao. He is Qin Hao. I brought you here to find him." "You bastard." Zhou Wendi was furious. He had seen people who tricked their own father, but he had never seen someone who tricked their own ancestor. Did he bring him here to die? Deceiving one's own master and destroying one's own ancestors was treacherous. Terrifying imperial light flashed. Zhou Wendi raised his palm, and the great Tao of true self howled. If Zhou Wudao was not his own flesh and blood, he would not have been able to resist the urge to kill him. "Zhou Wendi!" Holy Emperor Jiang shouted. He teleported and stood beside Qin Hao. The great Tao of true self firmly protected him. He said calmly, "It's just meeting a junior. Why are you so angry?" Chapter 16:26. Junior? Zhou when he looked at Qin Hao. His disguise was really good. No wonder the emperor's present did not show the respect they should have. His identity had not been exposed, but how could he hide it from him? He was smarter than others. Come with me, Saint Jiang said. Saint Emperor Jiang said. This was not the place to talk. Qin Hao, Xiao called out worriedly. He felt that the atmosphere was not right. I have some things to ask the two seniors. The ancestor slaying team will come with me. Father-in-law and everyone else, please return to the Liao Empire first. Qin Hao said. He would not waste too much time. Okay. Xiao Yi nodded. The ancestor slaying team's cultivation was very reassuring. With him accompanying, there would not be too much of a problem. I'll stay too. Su Jin stepped to Qin Hao's side, his expression firm. Okay. Qin Hao agreed. Su Jin was different from the others. Xiaohua, Yi Shuihan, and Xiao Han all had elders watching over them, so it was inevitable that they would talk. Su Jin had no relatives. Gooden's previous life was a creature born of the Nirvana will. He had no feelings for the entire world. To him, Qin Hao was the only person he cared about and relied on. Rays of Emperor light passed through the void and headed into the distance. Saint Jiang was the first to leave, and Qin Hao and the others followed closely behind. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared from everyone's sight. Xiao Yi watched Qin Hao leave and felt that his son-in-law was becoming more and more different. In the past, although Qin Hao was also very outstanding, his talent surpassed his generation, and he had his own principles. The more Xiao Yi knew that Qin Hao's foundation was very deep. What kind of characters were Saint Emperor Jiang and Zhou Wendy? Qin Hao didn't lose out in the slightest when facing the two of them. As they conversed, the three of them seemed to treat each other as equals. Even Zhou Wendy felt a faint sense of fear when facing Qin Hao, which was why he was doing his best to restrain himself. This was definitely not the behavior of Supreme Emperor Lord. There might be other stories behind Qin Hao, but so what? He was still Qin Hao. Since he was in the north, he was Xiao Yi's son-in-law. That was enough. Let's go. Rays of golden-white monarch light flashed by as dozens of monarchs streaked across the sky. It was a spectacular sight. At this moment, countless warriors in Swallow Return City were watching, unable to calm down for a long time. On this day, a group of emperors descended upon northern Yen. The hall master of Luxing Hall was killed. The abbot of Tiangang Temple abdicated his position and no longer cared about the disputes of the mortal world. The Murong clan fell, and northern Yen no longer had any emperors guarding it. All of this was because of one person. Today was destined to be recorded in the annals of the northern frontier. And at this moment, if not to kill him, what was he planning to do? He stared at Jiang Laoguang and Zhang Guanghe. One was an emperor lord, and the other was a true self great emperor. Zhang Guang, he was a former subordinate of Qin Hao. He was the vanguard of the Zhanlang army, and he never doubted Denda's orders. Jiang Laoguang had visited the Sunset Peak in the past. It was said that he had received some benefits. Now that he could break into the true self realm, it proved that he didn't take the benefits for nothing. He would definitely speak for Qin Hao. If Zhang Guang, he and Jiang Laoguang worked together, they had at least a 50% chance of winning. They could keep Zhou Wendy here. Of course, they could force him to stay at any cost. Zhou Wendy would never be able to escape, but he was also confident that he could drag Zhang Guanghe down with him. Zhou Jinsi, why don't you try shouting again? Don't think that I can't do anything to you without Zhanlang and you foam. Zhang Guang, his white beard was flying. His eyes were red, and his murderous intent was written all over his face. He wasn't trying to scare Zhou Wendy. He was really angry. Qin Hao was able to become what he was today because of Zhou Wendy and the others. He was one of the murderers back then. Qin Hao waved his hand, indicating that Zhang Guang, he shouldn't be impulsive. He looked at Zhou Wendy calmly. If I kill you, Zhou Wudao won't be involved. Moreover, there's no need to lie. I'll go back to the East Continent to settle accounts with you. His calm tone was extremely threatening. Moreover, it was extremely firm. We're old friends. We haven't seen each other for 600 years. Do you have to be like this? Even if we fight, it won't be too late to fight after drinking the tea. Don't worry, I didn't poison you. Saint Emperor Jiang said. Humph. Zhou when he slowly sat down. The Emperor Qi surrounding his body didn't dissipate. Facing Qin Hao, he didn't dare to be careless or underestimate him. But he also knew that Qin Hao didn't need to lie to kill. Saint Emperor Jiang also didn't need to poison him. As a Supreme Emperor Lord, he would just fight fair and square. He disdained such tricks. Say it. What price do I have to pay for you to let me go? Zhou when he looked at Qin Hao and said. All that was left was a strand of stubbornness. It was impossible for old Taoist Yun Yi to run out to set up the array. If he left the divine palace, his obsession would probably immediately disappear. Moreover, he didn't know Qin Hao from back then. The two of them didn't have any interactions. I can let you go, but you have to help me deal with someone. Qin Hao looked at Zhou Wendy. Who is it? Zhou when he craned his neck. East Continent's Shun Qian. Qin Hao said through gritted teeth. Divine Firmament Palace Lord. Zhou Wendy's face was severely distorted. This person's cultivation was extremely strong and not easy to deal with. He had reached the perfected self realm 600 years ago. His cultivation must be even higher now. He might have reached the extreme of perfected self. Even though Zhou Wendy was also at the second realm of Emperor Dao, there was a certain gap between them. Kill him, and our grudges will be written off, Qin Hao said. Are you sure? Zhou Wendy asked in return. If I return to the East Continent, I will give you the forestless mountain range in Daqin and the surrounding area, Qin Hao promised. All right, but I need to borrow someone from you. Zhou Wendy's gaze landed on Divine Emperor Jiang. It was very risky for him to deal with Divine Firmament Palace Lord alone. He might even be killed by him. I only found the truth of perfected self after cultivating in isolation for hundreds of years. I can go to the East Continent to find Divine Firmament Palace Lord to test my cultivation. Divine Emperor Jiang agreed without waiting for Qin Hao to speak. Dinah had helped him before. Qin Hao looked at Divine Emperor Jiang. He was more than 1,000 years old, but he was still so hot-blooded. However, this battle would not be easy. He might be injured to the core. Looking at Zhang Guanghe, Qin Hao said, Guanghe, you go with Divine Emperor Jiang. Be careful. Unless it is absolutely necessary, do not reveal the 9 heaven consecutive strikes. Take the Xianyuan halberd with you. Even though Divine Firmament Palace was not within Daqin's territory, it was better to be careful in case Zhang Wu found out. As for Jiang Lao, since he was willing to help, Qin Hao would not refuse. He indeed needed Divine Emperor Jiang's help. Zhang Guang, he hesitated for a moment and finally nodded. He actually wanted to stay by Qin Hao's side. The Zhang clan had waited for 600 years. Haha, good. With Jiang Lao and Guang He accompanying me, Shun Xian will definitely die. Zhou Wendy's confidence was greatly boosted. 2 perfected self and 1 perfected self. Even if Divine Firmament Palace Lord had reached the peak of perfected self, he would not be able to stop the 3 of them. Facing the rising sun of the Great Path, he breathed a sigh of relief. The limit of Emperor's Path, the Nirvana realm. Who in the East Continent had stepped into this level? Probably no one. If Zhang Wu knew about this, would he feel guilty and regretful about what happened in the past? The one who regretted it more was Han Lingxian. Dinda was about to marry another girl. Poor Empress Lingxian of the East Continent. So what if she had thousands of miles of land? She had missed the most important person in her life. The news of Qin Hao's return to Liao City and his marriage to Xiao Han caused a huge sensation and quickly spread across the Beijiang. The news of the marriage went beyond the West Ocean and covered the entire western Liang. This time, Qin Hao had returned and led the emperors to fight in Yingyue City in the Beijiang. He had become the absolute focus of attention, and now he was marrying Emperor Zhao's daughter. The entire Beijiang was in an uproar, and the entire Western Liang was in an uproar. The senior members of the major forces and sect hurried from all directions and tried their best to arrive in Liao City on the day of the wedding to witness it in person. But for Qin Hao's family and friends, they were not too surprised. His marriage with Xiao Han should have been held a long time ago, but it had been delayed for too long. However, everyone was still full of expectations. On this day, in the prosperous Liao City, a group of people with great auras arrived. The group was bright and luxurious as they headed straight for the martial emperor palace. Western Liang Qin State, Old Ancestor Qin, Old Third Qin, Old Fourth Qin, Great Chancellor Haidafu, King Qi de Xiong. Tang Mansion, Old Ancestor Tang, Clan Leader Blood Qilin, Qin Hao's Uncle Tang Jia. Qin State's Supreme Patriarch, Fengli Temple, State Preceptor Chun Kang, as well as many juniors, Qin Yu, Zhua, Jun Shun, Fengli Temple disciples, Jian Ren, Tiger Cliff, Li Gangpao, Wang Taidan, and so on. The group stepped into the martial emperor palace and raised the banner of the Qin emperor. No one dared to stop them. They directly charged into Xiao Han's palace, Qin Hao's Hall of Thought, and caught Qin Hao red-handed. However, why didn't you go home first after returning from the southern region? It's fine even if you don't go. You fought with the Yin Emperor of the northern region, and now you're holding your wedding in Liao City. Have you considered the feelings of your ancestors? Old Fourth Qin lectured earnestly. He wanted to have a good talk with Qin Hao. How could a wedding not be held in the family of the man? If it could be said that the Qin clan relied on Xiao Wudi's name to hug Xiao Yi's thigh, things were different now. After Qin Hao's battle at Yingui City, everyone in the Qin clan heard that the entire Northern Borders Alliance was wiped out in one fell swoop. Qin Hao's fist defeated the divine monk of the northern region's Tiangang Temple, Huitong. Her smile could topple cities. Before she could open her mouth to speak, an invisible force suddenly descended. It was as if the heavenly Tao was crushing down, and it fell on Miao Li's body. The five-colored emperor light on her body suddenly shattered, and her radiant appearance faded rapidly. The wrinkles crawled back on her face, and the black spots were densely packed. Her upright figure gradually bent back. In an instant, she returned to her original position. How could this be? Qin Hao's eyes were filled with shock. It shouldn't be. Although the 300-year-old pearl grass couldn't withstand senior sister's flawless emperor's Tao, it should have been able to last until the wedding, even if it couldn't last long. Why did it only happen for a moment? This is the power of the heavenly Tao. Miori tried hard to raise her head and straighten her spine, but she felt as if she was carrying a heavy mountain and was being crushed by the power of the great Tao. Her flawless emperor's Tao couldn't withstand this power. The restraint of the heavenly Tao was something that even a peerless emperor couldn't break free from. Life and death were controlled by the heavens, not by men. Qin Hao still hadn't woken up from his shock. He watched helplessly as his senior sister aged again. Was this force of suppression the heavenly Tao? The divine palace was created to break the limits of martial arts. The pursuit of the divine Tao was the highest concept. Only by flying to the divine realm could one be on par with the heavenly Tao and not limited by lifespan, transcend reincarnation, and live forever. At this moment, Qin Hao remembered Migres's teachings. I'm useless. Qin Hao clenched his fists tightly. God. Only by becoming a god could one use the heavenly Tao to reverse the heavenly Tao and break the rules of survival of all things. If he became a god, senior sister wouldn't have to suffer so much. You've worked very hard, but your emperor's Tao cultivation is too far away from the heavenly Tao. Don't be sad. Not only senior sister, but all flawless great emperors, and even nirvana extremes as strong as master, can't escape the heavenly Tao. Muri stood on her tiptoes and wanted to pat Qin Hao's shoulder, but she realized that her junior brother was too tall for her to touch. With a slight sigh, Muri turned around and slowly walked out. This was fate. However, if Qin Hao wanted to see her original appearance on the day of the wedding, she could still fulfill such a small request. Heavenly Tao, Divine Realm. Qin Hao looked at the back of his senior sister as she left. That sigh went straight into the depths of his heart, like a mountain pressing down on his chest. Senior sister's current appearance was his future and also Xiao Han's future. It was a fate that no one could escape. To break this fate, one must become a god. The wedding was getting closer and closer, and there was only one day left. Liao City was filled with a grand scene.